Facebook, different
Good.
groups.
Great. Well, hello, Dee.
Hello.
How are you this evening?
I'm doing great, thank you. And how about yourself, Joe?
I'm also doing great this evening as well.
How's Bonnie doing?
She's doing fine. She's
That's good.
sitting right here waiting for things to happen. My daughter just sent me a note, said something crashed. So I'm wondering about whether the real debate uh, has crashed.
Huh.
Let me refresh the page and see. They say it will be live in a moment. I'm going to hit the arrow key and see if we get anything. It said in say. Oh, here it is. Okay, so I'm going to share it. I'm going to share the screen. I see we're getting a little buffering.
Welcome to the real debate. I'm John Stossel, moderator tonight. Live from Los Angeles, we're streaming the CNN debate, and here I will give Kennedy.
Okay, we've
In the
got
debate,
47
plus
people
Kennedy's
on here,
answers here.
49 people watching through us.
Okay.
Twitter, X, you're supposed to call it, and therealdebate.com.
We're getting a lot of buffering,
Hmm.
as you see.
Now,
Yes.
CNN as they introduce their broadcast.
We're live from Georgia, battleground state in the race for the White House. In just moments, the current U.S. president will debate the We want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around.
Wow. Hello. Brandy's here. Auntie Candy's here. Good to see everybody.
Yep, it's good to see you all. We're getting a little buffering here, so
Espanol.
we're obviously
This
getting
is a
some
pivotal moment
problems.
between President
Hey,
Joe Biden
Andy.
and
Hey,
former
Brandy.
President Donald Trump in their rematch
Hey, April, I should
for the
say.
nation's highest office. Each will make his case to the American people with just over 4 months until Election Day. Good evening. I'm Dana Bash, anchor of CNN's Inside Politics and co-anchor of State of the Union.
I'm Jake Tapper, anchor of CNN's The Lead and co-anchor of State of the Union. Dana and I will co-moderate this evening. Our job is to facilitate a debate between the two candidates tonight. Before we introduce them, we want to share the rules of the debate with the audience at home. Former President Trump will be on the left side of the screen. President Biden will be appearing on the right. A coin toss determined their positions. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer a question and 1 minute each for responses.
microphone is muted. He will be difficult to understand for viewers at home. At the end of the debate, each candidate will get 2 minutes for closing statements. There is no studio audience tonight. Pre-written notes, props, or these rules.
Now, please welcome the 46th President of the United States, Joe Biden.
Folks, how are you? Great to be here. Thank you.
Welcome, Robert Kennedy Jr.
Gentlemen, thanks so much for being here. Let's begin the debate. Let's start with the issue that voters consistently say is there
Thank you.
the economy.
Thank you.
Since you took office, the price of essentials has increased. For example, a basket of groceries that cost $100 then now costs more than $120. And typical home prices have jumped more than 30%. What do you say to voters who feel they are worse off under your presidency than they were under President Trump?
We got to take a look at what I was left when I became president and what Mr. Trump left me. We had an economy that was in free fall. The pandemic was so badly handled. Many people were dying. All he said was, it's not that serious. Just inject a little bleach into your arm. It'll be all right. The economy collapsed. There were no jobs. Unemployment rate rose to 15%. It was terrible. And so what we had to do is try to put things back together again. And that's exactly what we began to do. We created 15,000 new jobs. We brought out, I come from Scranton, Pennsylvania. I come of a household where the kitchen table, if the things weren't able to be met during the month, it was a problem. Price of eggs, the price of gas, the price of housing, the price of a whole range of things. That's why I'm working so hard to make sure I deal with those problems. And we're going to make sure that we reduce the price of housing. We're going to make sure we build 2 million new units. We're going to make sure we cap rents so corporate greed can't take over. The combination
talk over
that was left
a little bit
of the
here.
corporate greed is the reason why we're in this
He's
problem
not going to
right now.
reduce the price of
In
housing.
addition to that, we're in a situation
Not
where
going to do that
if
unless
you
it
have to
collapses
take a
the
look at all that
economy.
was done in his administration.
Right. And then he uses the word, we're going to build 200 more units. I'm
By
like,
the time
what?
he left, there were things were in chaos, literally chaos. And so we have some prescription drugs, which is a major issue for many people. To $15 for a insulin shot as opposed to $400. No senior has to pay more than $200 for any drug, all the drugs they could include beginning next year. And the situation is we're going to make that available to everybody, to all Americans. So we're working to bring down the price of around the kitchen table. And that's what we're going to get done.
Thank you, President Trump.
Hi there, Greg.
We had the greatest economy in the history of our country. We have never done so well. Everybody was amazed by it. Other countries were copying us. We got hit with COVID, and when we did, we spent the money necessary so we wouldn't end up in a Great Depression, the likes of which we had in 1929. By the time we finished, so we did a great job. We got a lot of credit for the economy, a lot of credit for the military, and no wars, and so many other things. Everything was rocking good.
My question is, which Biden body double did they bring out for this?
Us out of that COVID mess. He created mandates that was a disaster for our country. But other than that, we had given them back a country where the stock market actually was higher than pre-COVID, and nobody thought that was even possible. The only jobs he created are for illegal immigrants and bounce back jobs.
So
A bounce
he
back
thinks
from
we
the
ought to
COVID.
care that the
He has
stock
not done a
market
good
is higher.
job. He's done a poor job, and inflation's killing our country. It is absolutely killing us.
Thank you, President Biden.
Well, look, the greatest economy in the world. He's the only one that thinks that, I think.
I don't
everybody
think
else
this
thinks he had the greatest economy.
Well, I don't
in the
think
world.
this is the greatest
And,
economy
you
either.
know,
So
the fact of the matter is that
I don't think so
we
either.
found
What the
ourselves in a
fuck is with him and
situation
all
where
that coughing?
the idea that he did something that was significant. And the military.
He's
You know,
definitely. This is
when he was
definitely a
president,
body double.
we're still killing
Yeah.
people in Afghanistan. He didn't do anything about that. When he was president, we were still finding ourselves in a position where you had a notion that we were this safe country. The truth is, I'm the only president.
Hey, you're the only
Essentially,
president to
doesn't
fuck
have
up
any
everything
this-
that you ever touched.
this decade that done any troops dying anywhere in the
What is he talking about? There's no troops dying anywhere in the world?
everybody for being here and for this opportunity. And thank you, John. I also want to thank Elon Musk for live streaming this on X. CNN made some statements suggesting that that might be, he may get sued for that. And I'm very, very grateful for the courage that he's shown to protect freedom of speech in this country. I want to just orient us a little bit about why we're here tonight. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm complaining, because this isn't a personal issue. This is something that should be very troubling for our country. What happened with this debate? My uncle gave the first televised debate in 1960. Ever since then, the debate has been run by nonpartisan organizations, the League of Women Voters till 1988, and then the debating commission thereafter. And this is the first time that a private have an incentive to go ahead and collude with the two presidential candidates whose main purpose was to keep me off the stage. And again, this isn't a personal issue. This is something that's important for our democracy, because Americans feel like the system is rigged. And this is this collusion with a corporation or private corporation, that both those campaigns are going to be pumping in tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising. Oh, it's all a big payoff. This is exactly the kind of merger of state and corporate power that I'm running in order to oppose. And the Americans believe the system is rigged against them because it is. And this is an example of how badly rigged it is.
Okay,
question
we're following the rules here. You're 2 minutes.
So do whatever you want with the minute that we
It's your
give you.
show. You should get an
wanna follow up.
introduction.
I got to follow up.
We're going back to the debate.
I got to follow up, right?
Well, I'm going to ask you a follow-up. You can do
Not
whatever you want.
according to the person in my ear here.
They tried to put them on Social Security.
Tariff on all goods coming into the U.S. How will you ensure that that doesn't drive prices even higher?
Not going to drive them higher. It's just going to cause countries that have been ripping us off for years, like China and many others, in all fairness to China. It's going to just force them to pay us a lot of money, reduce our deficit tremendously, and give us a lot of power for other things. We give them everything they want. No, we inherited almost no inflation, and it stayed that way for 14 months. And then it blew up under his leadership because they spent money like a bunch of people that didn't know what they were doing, and they don't know what they were doing. It was the worst, probably the worst administration in history. There's never been. And as far as Afghanistan is concerned, I was or he got out. It was the most embarrassing day in the history of our country's life.
President Trump, over the last 8 years,
You take credit for the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, which returned.
He says
the states.
the question was prices were higher because of Trump's 10% tariff.
And this is it is a problem, because these two men are the people who ran up the deficit that is causing the inflation. President Trump came into office promising to balance the budget. Instead, he spent more money in office than every president in the United States history combined, from George Washington to George W. Bush, 283 years of history. President Biden will beat him. He's already run up $6.3 trillion in debt, and by the time he leaves office, he'll have run up more than President Trump. That's why we have inflation. Inflation is caused because they're printing money to pay. We have
Here
a
we go with
22%
printing
hike
money.
in
No,
home insurance.
no.
That's why we have
That
$4
just
milk.
drives me
$4
insane
bread,
hearing people
$6
talk about
gasoline.
printing money.
It's because of the forever wars and the out of control spending.
Okay,
by
there
these
have been
two gentlemen.
empirical studies
We have a $34
that
trillion
show
debt now.
that
The interest
two big factors
alone on
in
that debt
inflation
is
are
costing us
supply
more than our
chain
military
interruptions
budget.
and
Within
price
5
gouging.
years, 50
The
cents out of every
inflation had
dollar
nothing
that
to
we
do
collect in
with
taxes
deficits
will go to servicing the debt.
or printing
Within
money.
10 years, 100%. This
Not to mention
is
driving up the
existential.
interest
This
rates.
is one of the problems
Not to
that
mention
neither of
later
these two
on
will talk
driving up
about.
interest
This is the
rates. That's
problem.
correct.
This is the reason
Absolutely
that
right.
they need me
When
on
you
stage.
cut, I was
Because I would
reading
confront them with what they
piece
did.
here a
They were
few
the
years
Okay,
back.
also,
and half of
Bobby
this deficit
is not
is
right
attributable to
about
those two men, and that's what's
this
causing
being
inflation.
the first time
We'll never deal with inflation if we don't
that there was a mix of
deal with the money
corporations and the
printing problem,
parties
and neither of them are going to
controlling
do it.
debates.
Money printing.
The presidential
Back to the
commissions
debate.
for years now have been controlled by
Far, President
the
Biden, you've
parties.
approved $4.3 trillion in new debt. So, former President Trump, many of the tax cuts that you
In a piece that I
signed into
read
law are set to
here a
expire
while
next
back
year. You want
by
to extend them and go even further, you
Ellis
say.
Winningham.
With the U.S. facing trillion-dollar
He
deficits
said that
and
when you
record debt,
slash the
why should
federal
top earners and
deficit
corporations pay
at the
even less in
same time as
taxes
driving
than they
up
do now?
interest
Because the
rates,
tax cuts
you will
spurred the
have out of
greatest
control
economy that we've
inflation.
ever seen just prior to COVID. And even after COVID, it was so strong that we were able to get through COVID much better than just about any other
But that's
country.
what that
But we
piece by
spurred
Ellis Winningham
a tax
stated.
spurred. Now, when we cut the taxes, as an example, the corporate tax was cut down to 21% from 39%, plus beyond that. We took in more revenue with much less tax, and companies were bringing back trillions of dollars back into our country. The country was going like never before, and we were ready to start paying down debt. We were ready to start using the liquid
Paying
gold
down.
right under our
No.
feet, the oil and gas right under our feet. We were going to have something that nobody else has had.
No, if we
We
started
got
to
hit
pay
with
down
COVID.
debt, it would
We
have
did a
caused
lot to fix
depression.
it. I gave him an unbelievable situation with all of the therapeutics and all of the things that we came up with. But he had far more people dying in his administration. He did the mandate, which is a disaster, mandating it. The vaccine went out. He did a mandate on the vaccine, which is the thing that people most objected to about the vaccine. And he did a very poor job, just a very poor job. And I will tell you, not only poor there, but throughout the entire world, we're no longer respected as a country. They don't respect our leadership. They don't respect the United States anymore. We're like a third world nation between weaponization of his election, trying to go after his political opponent. All of the things he's done, we've become like a third world nation. And it's a shame. The damage he's done to our country. And I'd love to ask him, and will, why he allowed millions of people to come in here from prisons, jails, and mental institutions to come into our country and
Trump
destroy our
always
country.
tells half truth.
President Trump, we will get to immigration later in this block. President Biden, I want to give you
This is going to cause Biden's poll numbers to sink.
He had the largest national debt of
Yeah, I
any
think they
president in a
will.
4-year period, number one. Number two,
I think what this
he got
is a
$2
test
trillion
run
tax cut
to
benefited the very
see how
wealthy.
Biden will do
Now, when
in
I'm
the
gonna do
general
the tax system, for
sense
example, we have
before they
1,000 trillionaires in America.
just
I mean,
get
billionaires
rid
in
of
America.
him.
And what's happening?
It could very well
They're in
be.
a situation where they, in fact, pay 8.2% in taxes. If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers, they've raised $500 million, billion dollars, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do,
Biden doesn't know what he's
child
saying.
care, elder care, making sure that we
Cannot
continue to
wipe out debt with
strengthen
saving
our healthcare
$500
system,
billion a
making
year
sure that we're able
from
to
taxes.
make every single solitary
That
person
can't happen.
eligible for what I've been able to do with the
Doesn't
with
understand
the
his
COVID.
numbers.
Excuse me, with
He's listening to
dealing with
Larry
everything we
Summers.
had to do with.
I don't even know if he's listening to Larry Summers. I don't know who's in his ears, but he doesn't understand. He can't
We finally
handle
beat
the numbers
Medicare.
anymore.
Security. He will wipe out Social Security. He will wipe out Medicare. So he was right in the way he finished that sentence. And it's a shame. What's happened to our country in the last 4 years is not to be believed.
Trump is the guy.
Foreign countries,
Anyone.
I'm friends with
Trump
a lot
is
of
the
people.
guy who's going to wipe out Social
Cannot
Security.
believe what happened to the United States of America. We're no longer respected. They don't like us. We give them everything they want, and they think we're stupid. They think we're very stupid people. What we're doing for other countries, and they do nothing for us. What this man has done is absolutely criminal.
I actually agree with Trump
And
there.
he
What
gave you
have
the
these
president.
other
They veered off.
countries done for us that
Tax.
we continue to
Trump
prop up?
says lower taxes, more stimulus. Biden
Like, what has
says
Israel
higher
ever done
taxes,
for us?
What
more
they
money.
do
Ukraine
for
ever
us.
done for us?
I,
I'll
What
tell
has
you
Taiwan
I'll
ever
tell you
done
what
for
they
us?
do for us, Greg.
a strong economy, but anybody can
What
have
they
a
do for us
strong economy
is that
by
they
borrowing
obey
$8
our
trillion
commands.
because you're forcing
That's
our
what they do
children
for us.
to pay for our
They are bought by us.
present-day prosperity with this enormous debt,
That's not good for them.
which ultimately is paid by the poor, by people of
What Germany did
because
was
these
to
two
accept the destruction of the
presidents
pipeline
shut down every business in our
that
country.
they own 50%
3.3
of, and you
million
didn't hear a
businesses
peep from
with
them
no due
about it.
process, no
It
just
ruined their
compensation.
industry.
They have 41%
Much
of
of that
black-owned
industry is moving over here.
businesses that they closed will never reopen. There was no scientific reason to do this. There was no public
So that's
hearing.
what the transaction is.
They made a
We
bad
prop them
mistake,
up
and
economically,
that
and they
was
obey
when
us.
the worst financial hierarchy of billionaires that he was
And
talking
that
about.
system is now breaking
They
down.
created a billionaire a day in 500 days. And one of the problems is that CNN was their biggest cheerleader. So, and the same company, BlackRock, the same company, the biggest shareholders, the company that owns CNN are BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. Those are the same companies that own Pfizer. Pfizer's the biggest advertiser. Well, they were all in cahoots in telling us what we needed to do, and we ended up having the worst record of body count of any country in the world. We had 16% of the COVID deaths under these two presidents. We only have 4% of the world's population. Oh, I don't know why people are getting awards where they're all patting each other on the back.
Okay, so we had a huge amount of deaths, but if you control for population,
This is the
deaths per
first
thousand,
presidential election since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade.
we were not as
This
great
morning,
as a good many other
the court
countries.
ruled on yet another abortion case,
We were maybe on that
temporarily
ranking,
allowing
we were maybe
emergency
30th in the
abortions
world
to
or something
continue in
like that.
Idaho, despite that state's restrictive ban. Former President Trump, you take credit for the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, which returned the issue of abortion to the states. However, the federal government still plays a role in whether or not women have access to abortion.
If you really want to see something that'll harm the U.S., look up Agenda 2030. It's like Project 2025 on steroids.
Yes, it is.
And I agree with their decision to
And
have done
Project
that. And I will not
2025
block
is
it.
something
And
that
if you look
Trump
at
is going
this
to
whole,
implement if he's elected.
you had Roe v. Wade, and everybody wanted to get it back to the states. Everybody, without exception, Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives.
He's just
Everybody wanted it
lying.
back.
He's
religious
babbling
leaders.
lies.
And what I did is I put 3 great Supreme Court justices on the court, and they happened to vote in favor of killing Roe v. Wade and moving it back to the
He
states. This is
appointed the
something
greatest
that
Supreme Court justice.
everybody wanted.
He's
Now,
appointed
10
the
years
worst
ago or
Supreme
so, they
Court
started
justices in
talking
history.
about how many weeks and how many this, and getting into other
And
things.
people know it.
But
He's
every
going to
legal
lose on that
scholar
issue, lose
throughout
votes.
the world, most respected, wanted it brought back to the states. It was a little bit more liberal than you would have thought. Kansas I would say the same thing. Texas is different, Florida is different, but they're all making their own decisions right now. Right now,
Yes,
states
Christo
control it.
fascism is right.
The vote of people. Like Ronald Reagan, I believe in
Medicare for all would end all this.
It sure
and
would.
frankly, I think it's
And they're
important to
both
believe in the
opposed
exceptions.
to
Some
Medicare for
people,
all.
you have to follow your heart. Some people don't believe in
Both
that.
of them.
But I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. I think it's very important. Some people don't follow your heart, but you have to get elected also. And because that has to do with other things. You got to get elected. The 8th month, the 9th month, and even after birth. After birth. If you look at the former governor of Virginia, he was willing to do this. He said, we'll put the baby aside. Determine what we do with the baby, meaning we'll kill the baby.
He doesn't know.
What
that
happened
this
is
is
we
a
brought
lie.
it back to the states, and
I mean, this guy
is now coming
flat out
together on this issue. It's been a great thing.
Thank you. President Biden?
Well, they lost Virginia because they ran Terry McAuliffe when they shouldn't have.
Support it, Roe.
Yes, that's
And
right.
that's this idea that they're all against it is just ridiculous. And this is the guy who says the state should be able to have it. We're in a state where in 6 weeks you don't even know whether you're pregnant.
Biden's polling is going to
Your
tank
doctor have your
even farther tonight.
him decide on what your circumstances are, whether you need help. The idea that states are able to do this is a little like saying we're going to turn civil rights back to the states. Let each state have a different rule. Look, there's so many young women. They talk about that, but here's the deal.
Well, why don't you support a national Medicare for all standard where it would prevent
by their
this?
spouses, brothers
Well,
and
we
sisters.
know why, because he's bought by the
It's just ridiculous.
the pharmaceutical companies.
You can do nothing about it.
In 2020, he took what?
Thank you.
Many young
Shit.
women murdered
Probably
by the same people
41
he allows
million from
across our border.
both
We have a border
sectors, the
that's the most
pharmaceutical
dangerous
and the
place anywhere in the
private
world.
health
It's
insurance
the most
companies.
dangerous place anywhere in the world. And he opened it up, and these killers are coming into our country, and they are raping and killing women. And it's a terrible thing. As far as the abortion's concerned, it is now back with the states. The states are voting. In many cases, it's frankly a very liberal decision. In many cases, it's the opposite. But they're voting, and it's bringing it back to the vote of the people, which is what everybody wanted, including the founders, if they knew about this issue, which frankly they didn't.
Yeah,
They would have
who knows what the
everybody
founders
wanted
would have thought.
to get it back. I was the one to do it. And again, this gives the vote of the people, and that's where they wanted it. Every legal scholar wanted it that way.
No, every
position
legal
on
scholar
Roe
does
v.
not want it that way.
I've spent
It wasn't
probably
Russian disinformation. He made up
for
the substance
energy,
of
protecting
Rose's
medical
He should
freedom,
apologize
and
to me right now.
any other leader in this country.
General Senator Stein was on your step who said you said it, period. That's number one. Number two,
And Bob, they worry about state involvement until the baby reaches viability. And I think the states have an increasing viability outside the womb. And I think the states have an increasing interest in protecting that child. My policy on abortion is called or choice, fewer abortions.
All right, thank you
And
so much.
that's because 50%
Foreign policy.
of the
I want to
abortions
begin
in
with
this country,
Russia's
the woman
war
says that
against Ukraine, which is now
economic
in its third year.
considerations were
Former
the
President
were the-
Trump, Russian
played the
President
role in her
Vladimir
decision.
Putin says he'll only
Every
end
abortion is a
war
tragedy.
if Russia keeps the
Many women
Ukrainian
don't want to have
territory
abortions.
reclaimed
Over half of them
and
have them
Ukraine
because they do
abandons its
not
bid
believe
to
that they
join
can care for
NATO.
that child for financial
Are these
reasons.
terms acceptable to you?
I don't think that that should happen in this country.
And our soldiers
I
can't
have
stand
a
it.
child
They can't stand it.
child
They think it's the
care
worst
program.
commander-in-chief, if that's what
As
you
I
call him,
talked to you
that we've ever
before,
had. They can't stand him. So let's
every
get that
dollar that we
straight.
spend,
And they like me more than
$1
just
million
about any
that we spend on child
That's
care
what's good.
creates
Every
20.
single bit of information. As
It's
far as
good for our
Russia,
economy.
if we had
It's
a real
good for
president,
choice. It's good for limiting
respected by
abortions, and that's what I'll do as president.
He would have never invaded Ukraine. A lot of people can't do it. Much more than people know. You know, they talk about numbers. You can double those numbers, maybe
Russian
triple
President
those numbers.
Biden 7
He did
states.
nothing to stop it. In fact, I
only
think
do
he
that,
encouraged Russia
this is
from going in.
the
I'll
same
tell you what
topic.
happened. He was
7
so bad
states
with
have
Afghanistan.
no
It was
legal
such horrible
restrictions on
embarrassment.
how
It was
far
the
into a
embarrassing
pregnancy a
moment in
woman
the history of our
can
country.
obtain an
And when
abortion.
Putin watched
Do
that
you
and he
support
saw the
any
incompetence that he
legal
should
limits
have
on how
fired
late a
that
woman
general,
should
but
be
they
able to
fired
terminate
the unit.
the pregnancy?
I
So he's
support
got
Roe v. Wade.
but he should have
Which is
fired those generals. No
Simon,
general got
first
fired.
time
Except you didn't years ago.
between the
When Roe
doctor
v. Wade was
and extreme
discussed in
situation. The third
1973,
time
you were
between
vehemently opposed to
the
it.
doctor
Even in the
having to be between a
1980s,
woman
you
and a
were
state.
opposed to Roe v. Wade.
The idea that
Democrats have had
politicians, that the
50
founders wanted for
or more
politicians
years
should
to
be one big
codify Roe
one
v.
cell.
Wade in the federal
Ridiculous.
law,
That's the last.
and they
No
didn't. They had a chance under Jimmy Carter's administration and didn't. They had a chance
That's
under
how
Bill Clinton's administration, but didn't. They had a chance under Barack Obama and didn't. They even
And they
had
had
a chance under
under
this
Biden
administration and didn't.
under
They
Biden,
use,
and they did.
even after birth.
yes, they
because some
used it as a
states
fundraiser.
regret
It was an
run
issue every
even after
time.
birth. Again,
You
the
have to
governor,
vote for us. You
the
have
governor of
to because
Virginia,
we're the only ones
the baby
that
down,
could,
then we
and
what
then
to
they
do. And
failed.
so he's willing to, as we say, rip the baby out of the womb in the 9th month and kill the baby. Nobody wants that to happen. Democrat or Republican.
Dude, nobody's
wants
saying
that to happen.
anything about rip the baby out at the
That is
9th month.
simply not
Nobody
true.
has even
And Roe v.
advocated for
We
anything
think
past
Democrats
the
are
5th or
radical,
6th
not the
month.
Republicans.
Yeah,
For
I know.
51
Trump
years,
is
that was the law. 51 years,
a
constitutional
free-form liar.
scholarship said it was the right way to go. 51 years, and it was taken away because this guy put very conservative members on the Supreme Court. He takes
Well,
credit for taking it away.
also another factor
What's he
into
gonna
why
do?
Roe
What's he
v.
gonna
Wade
do
was
if that-
overturned was
if
because
the MAGA Republicans, he gets
of
elected,
Ruth Bader
the MAGA
Ginsburg's
Republicans control the
failure
Congress,
to
and they pass
retire
a
under
universal ban
Obama in
on
his
abortion,
first
period,
term
across the
when
board.
she could have been
That's
replaced by somebody
separated
else.
Henry, something very, very conservative.
I blame
If you're going to sign
her
that
as
bill,
well
I'll
because of her
to it. He'll sign
recklessness.
it.
And she died while on the bench.
Give you the same question, Mr.
She could have
Kennedy. Should you
retired
be
in
in-
2009,
Absolutely,
2010,
that's what
went
was
lived her
permitted
life
under Roe
gracefully,
v.
but yet
Wade.
she
That's what every
didn't.
European
Right,
country
It's your
because
fault as well.
has the same law, and that law makes sense. If that baby is fully viable outside of the womb, the state has an absolute interest in protecting it.
Mhm.
Conservatives only want live babies so they'll grow up to be dead soldiers. From the
issue of
time they're
immigration and border security, President
conceived to the
Biden, a
time they're
record number
born,
of
they
migrants
give a
have
shit about the
illegally crossed
baby.
the southern border on your
Between
watch.
that time and
Overwhelming
when they
border
reach
states,
military age,
overburdening cities
that's when
such
they
as New
give a
York,
fuck.
Chicago, and in some
They don't give a
cases
shit
cause
until
real
that
safety
baby
and
is
security concerns.
born and out of the
Given
womb,
that, why should voters trust you
or
to
between
solve this
that
crisis?
time and when they reach
Because we
military
worked very
age.
hard to get a bipartisan agreement that not only changed all of that, it made sure that we are in a situation where you had no circumstance where they could come across the border with the number of border police there are now. We significantly increased the number of asylum officers. Significantly, by the way, the border patrolman endorsed my position. In addition to that, we found ourselves in a situation where when he was president, he was separating babies from their mothers, putting them in cages, making sure they were the families were separated. That's the right way to go. What I've done since I've changed the law, what's happened? I've changed it in a way that now we're in a situation where they're
You ought to find out
the
what he's
total initiative relative to what we can do with more border patrol and more asylum.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look, we had the safest border in the history of our country. All he had to do was leave it. All he had to do was leave it.
Thank you. Moving on to the
Decided
Middle
to
East.
open
In
up our border, open
October,
up our country
Hamas
to
attacked Israel,
people that
killing more
are
than 1,000
from
people and
prisons,
taking hundreds of
people that
hostages.
are from
Among
mental
those held
institutions,
to
insane
still be
asylums,
alive are 5 Americans.
terrorists. We have the largest
Israel's
number of terrorists
response
coming
has
into our
killed
country
thousands of
right now.
millions
All
and
terrorists,
humanitarian
all over the
crisis
world,
in
not
Gaza.
just in.
President
And this
Biden
guy just
just
left
put
it open,
forward a
and he didn't need
proposal to resolve
legislation.
Not to
They
mention
didn't have
these
legislation. They said
Andy Candy,
close
you're
the
That's
so
border.
right.
The safest
echo in
border
the
in history.
background. I'm
In
not
that
sure where
final
it's coming
couple of
from.
months of my
It's making
presidency,
things even
we
more
had,
complicated.
according to Border Patrol, who is great. And by the way, who endorsed me for president, but I won't say that, but they endorsed me for president. Brandon, just speak to him. But look, we had the safest border in history. Now we have the worst border in history. There's never been anything like it. And people are dying all over the place, including the people that are coming up in
Thank you, President
caravans.
Trump. President Biden?
The only terrorist who's done anything crossing the border is one who came along and killed three, under his administration, killed an Al-Qaeda person come in and his administration. That's the only terrorist that's there. I'm not saying no terrorist ever got through, but the idea they're emptying their prisons, we're welcoming these people, that's simply not true. There's no data to support what he said. Once again, he's exaggerating, he's lying.
Yeah.
Almost.
They both lie.
Everything
So
that President Biden
Absolutely.
said, I know to be not to be true, including
Absolutely.
his
Biden's
claim
immigration
that he was
policies
endorsed by the
have
Border
been very
Patrol.
similar to Trump's.
And the border, there's been at least 7 million people who've come across the border, and they've come across principally, and this is without the gotaways, which are another 2 million. So those are the people who don't go through the gaps in the wall. President Biden, when he became president, ordered a stop on the construction of the wall. That's the problem. There are 27 gaps in the wall, and I stood in Yuma, Arizona between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. in the morning, and I watched 300 people come across, and I interviewed half of them. The first 110 came from West Africa. They're young men of military age. The second 110 were from Asia, from Azerbaijan, from Nepal, from Tibet, from Bangladesh. Most of them were from China. None of them, only 2 people the entire night that I interviewed had asylum claims. And what's happening is not sustainable. President Biden ordered the deconstruction of fences, the censoring systems were taken down. I can't tell you why.
And you should let him go.
Long distance cameras were taken down. Night lights were taken down.
But they don't like him
So
because
there was some decision in the administration to open up the border, and the 2 laws that were changed under President Biden as soon, and this is the day that he came in, the catch and release law, and
Time is up. Sorry, back to the CNN.
You said that you're going to carry out, quote, the largest domestic deportation operation in American history, unquote. Does that mean that you will deport every undocumented immigrant in America, including those who have jobs, including those whose spouses are citizens?
al-Baghdadi and Soleimani, the 2 greatest terrorists, biggest terrorists anywhere in the world. And it had a huge impact on everything, not just border, on everything. He's the one that killed people with the bad water, including hundreds of thousands of people dying, and also killing our citizens when they come in. We are living right now in a rat's nest. They're killing our people in New York, in California, in every state in the union, because we don't have borders anymore. Very stupid policies. People are coming in and they're killing our citizens at a level that we've never seen. We call it migrant crime. I call it Biden migrant crime. They're killing our citizens at a level that we've never seen before. And you're reading it like these 3 incredible young girls over the last few days. One of them, I just spoke to the mother, and he just had the funeral for this 12 years old. This is horrible what's taken place. What's taken place in our country. We're literally an uncivilized country now. He doesn't want it to be. He just doesn't know. He opened the borders. Nobody's ever seen anything like that. And we have to take a look at where they're living. They're living in luxury hotels in New York City and other places. Our veterans are on the street. They're dying because he doesn't care about our veterans. He doesn't care. He doesn't like the military.
Cue the circus music.
About our veterans. Nobody been worse. I had the highest approval rating for veterans taking care
And
of the
when
VA.
Trump is not
He is the worst.
speaking,
He's gotten rid of
the
all the things
expression
that I
on
approved.
his face
Choice that I got through Congress.
clearly Mussolini.
All of the different things I
He
approved.
looks
They
exactly
abandoned.
like Mussolini.
We had by far the highest. Now it's down in less than half because he's done all these great things that we did. And I think he did it just because
Whose
I
face
approved
looks
it.
like Mussolini?
But
Biden's
he has killed so
or
many people
Trump?
at our border by
Thank you,
allowing
President Trump.
all of these people
When
to
Trump
come
is
in.
not
And
speaking,
it's a
President
very
look,
sad day in America.
President Biden, you have the mic.
he has
Every single thing he
Mussolini
said is a
expression
lie. Every single one.
going on right now.
For example, veterans are a hell of a lot
When
better off
Biden's
since
not
they
speaking,
passed the PACT
he
Act.
looks like he's
1
completely
million of them
empathetic.
now.
He looks constipated, like he needs to take a shit.
Also in a situation where
Oh,
I have great respect for veterans. My son spent a year in Iraq, living right next to one of those burn pits, came back with stage 4 glioblastoma. I was recently in France for D-Day, and I spoke all about those heroes that died. I went to the general, and he told me, he said, I don't want to go in there because they're a bunch of losers and suckers. My son was not a loser, was not a sucker. You're the sucker. You're the loser.
President Trump.
First of all, that was a made-up quote. Suckers and losers. They made it up. It was in a third-rate magazine. It's failed, like many of these magazines. He made that up. We put it in commercials. We've notified him. We had 19 people that said I didn't say it. And think of this. Who would say I'm at a cemetery or I'm talking about our veterans? Because nobody's taking better care. I'm so glad this came up and he brought it up. There's nobody that's taken better care of our soldiers than I have. To think that I would, in front of generals and others, say suckers and losers. We have 19 people that said it was never said by me. It was made up by him, just like Russia was made up, just like the 51 intelligence agents are made up, just like the 16 economists are talking. It's the same thing. 51 intelligence agents said that the laptop was Russia disinformation. It wasn't. That came from his son Hunter. It wasn't Russia disinformation. He made up the suckers and losers, so he should apologize to me right now.
4-star along the line. We've done more for veterans than any president has in American history. And they now are.
Yeah, the Democrats are starting to panic right now.
Is to care
they
for our
should
veterans
start
when they come home
right now.
and their families and equip them.
They better go check their
That's what we're doing.
drawers.
That's what the VA is doing now. They're doing more for veterans than ever before in our history.
Mr. Kennedy, the question which neither candidate answered was, there are millions of undocumented immigrants in the country now. What would you do?
Well, I want to comment on their digressions, because I think President Trump is right that associated with the immigrants, but more importantly, there's just a sheer number of them, and I think a lot of the Democrats allowed this to happen out of a humanitarian impulse, out of the impulse of compassion. But when you're actually down there and talking to people, it's not a compassionate solution. The people that I talk to, many of them have been extorted, they've been exploited, they've been robbed, they've been raped. We have an immigration policy in this country that is now being run by the Sinaloa drug cartel. The Border Patrol bring them to the Yuma airport, put them on a plane to any destination they want. This is true. It sounds like hyperbole, but it's not. And they pay their ticket. And if they get reimbursement from FEMA, it's insane. There's 110,000 immigrants now in New York. President Trump's right. They're being put up at hotels. Many of them are on the street. They have a asylum court date 7 years in the future. They can't legally work. So they're taken advantage of by predatory employers. We're paying them $6 or $8 an hour, and those employers are bidding against union shops.
Goodwill pays their disabled workers half of what the minimum wage is.
Yes.
They are camped out in random Sandals Island on the playing fields where the children are supposed to be playing for, for sports. Those fields were closed during COVID. So these kids, these wonderful New York City kids, were scholarship tracked, could not play their sport, and their lives were, and now they're being the same thing.
Topic of foreign policy. I want to begin with Russia's war against Ukraine, which is now in its third year. Former President Trump, Russian President Vladimir Putin says he'll only end this war if Russia keeps the Ukrainian territory it has already claimed and Ukraine abandons its bid to join NATO. Are Putin's terms acceptable to you?
First of all, our veterans and our soldiers can't stand this guy. They can't stand him. They think he's the worst commander-in-chief, if that's what you call him, that we've ever had. They can't stand him. So let's get that straight. And they like me more than just about any of them. And that's based on every single bit of information. As far as Russia and Ukraine, if we had a real president, the president that knew, that was respected by Putin, he would have never invaded Ukraine. A lot of people are dead right now, much more than people know. You know, they talk about numbers. You can double those numbers, maybe triple those numbers. He did nothing to stop it. In fact, I think it's of our country that when Putin watched that and he saw the incompetence, that he should have fired those generals, like I fired the one that you mentioned. And so he's got no love lost. He should have fired those generals. No general got fired for the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country, Afghanistan, where we left billions of dollars of equipment behind. We lost 13 beautiful soldiers, and 38 soldiers were obliterated. And by the way, we left people behind too. We left American citizens behind. When Putin saw that, he said, you know what? I think we're going to go in and maybe take this was his dream. I talked to him about it, his dream.
Yeah, sure.
He never would have invaded Ukraine. Never. Just like Israel would have never been invaded in a million years by Hamas. You know why? Because Iran was broke. They had no money for anything, no money for terror. That's why you had no terror at all during my administration. This place, the whole world is blowing up under him.
President Biden?
I've never heard so much malarkey in my whole life. But the fact of the matter is that we're in a situation where, let's take the last point first. Iran attacked American troops. Caused brain damage for a number of these troops, and he did something about it. Recently, not when he was president. He said they're just having headaches. That's all it is. He didn't do a thing when they attacked us and others out of Afghanistan to bring that area. Number three, we found ourselves in a situation where, if you take a look at what Trump did in Ukraine,
what the fuck did Trump do in Ukraine?
Trump, do whatever you want, and do whatever you want, and that's exactly what Trump did. To Putin, encourage him, do whatever you want, and he went in. Listen to what he said when he went in. He was going to take Kyiv in 5 days. Remember, because it's part of the old Soviet Union. That's what he wanted to reestablish, Kyiv. And he in fact didn't do it at all. He wasn't able to get it done. And they've lost thousands and thousands of troops, 500,000 troops.
Full of it.
President,
He is.
Trump,
I never
back
said
to you
that.
for 1 minute.
He's
I just want to
absolutely
go
full
back
of it.
to my original question, which is, are Putin's terms acceptable to you? In the territory in Ukraine.
No, they're not acceptable. But look, this is a war that never should have started. If we had a leader in this war, he led everybody along. He's given $200 billion now or more to Ukraine. He's given $200 billion. That's a lot of money. I don't think there's ever been anything like it.
Well, to be fair, ISIS was created and funded by the U.S. government.
$60 billion. He's the greatest salesman ever. And I'm not knocking him. I'm not knocking anything. I'm only saying the money that we're spending on this war, and we shouldn't be spending, it should have never happened. I will have that war settled between Putin and Zelensky as president President-elect, before I take office on January 20th, I'll have the
people. And he has made one thing clear. He wants to reestablish what was part of the Soviet Empire, not just
No,
a
he
piece
hasn't.
of
No,
all of
stop it.
Ukraine.
No, he
That's
hasn't. That's
what he
bullshit.
wants.
What?
And
I
then you think
know.
he'll stop there? Do you think he'll stop
I mean, that is
He-
bullshit.
when
I will say this.
if he takes Ukraine? What do you think happens to Poland? What do you think of Belarus?
Oh,
What do you think
shut
happens
up.
to those NATO
I will say
countries?
this.
And
Trump
so if you want a
kept
war,
the lines
you
of
ought to
communication with
find out what he's going to do, because
He
if in
did.
fact he does
he would have
what he
talked
says
to
and walks
Putin
away.
had he
By the
been
way,
president
all that money we
when
give Ukraine
Putin
is
tried to
weapons we
warn the
make here in the
United
United
States about what would happen.
States, as much
And
funding
if
for
we had had a
Ukraine as
rational
we have.
president in there,
That's why
there
we're
wouldn't have
strong.
been any war in Ukraine.
Mr. Kennedy, the original question, if anyone remembers it, is it was a good one. It's you say you want to negotiate with Putin. What if Putin says, just let us keep the territory we have and don't have Ukraine join NATO? Acceptable?
That is Putin's right now, his opening bargaining position. Putin has been asking to settle this war from the beginning. In fact, he agreed to two separate treaties, the Minsk Accords in 2019, which Zelensky ran in 2019 and ran promising to sign the Minsk Accords. And really the only thing Putin wanted was to keep NATO out of the Ukraine. He then, in 2022, right after he first invaded with only 40,000 troops, when President Biden said there is absolute baloney, President Putin did not go into Ukraine intending to come. Zelensky asked the United States to help him negotiate a treaty with Putin. And Biden administration said no. Zelensky then went and asked Israel, and Naftali Bennett, the former prime minister, said yes, and Erdogan in Turkey said yes, and they negotiated a beautiful treaty in Istanbul in April of 2022. They signed the treaty. The one thing that Putin wanted was that we didn't put NATO in Ukraine. He didn't want to conquer Europe. And they signed it. Putin was withdrawing his troops, leaving Donbass and Lugansk, and forced Zelensky to tear up that agreement because they had another agenda, which is to weaken Russia. President Trump was part of it. President Trump gave the first $1.3 billion to Ukraine in 2017 of the first offensive weapons. He then sent Mike Pompeo over there in 2019 to say that we're going to put NATO over there. And then he walked away from the intermediate range nuclear treaty with Russia unilaterally. We had a nuclear weapons treaty that we wouldn't put intermediate missiles
Bobby's
in
on
Ukraine
top
or
of
the
this.
other former Soviet satellite states. And President Trump walked away from it. So the two of them are equally culpable in the provocations that led to this war. I'm not excusing Putin. Putin didn't need to go into Ukraine, and he should be held responsible too. But we need to look at our responsibility, and it falls both on the backs of President Trump and President Biden.
There's something new under the sun.
Right. So that was clearly the best answer of the three of them.
Yes.
Kennedy clearly won on that very big issue.
The Middle East. In October, Hamas attacked Israel, killing more than 1,000 people and taking hundreds of hostages. Among those held and thought to still be alive are 5 Americans. Israel's response has killed thousands of Palestinians and created a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. President Biden, you've put forward a proposal to resolve this conflict, but so far Hamas has not released the remaining hostages, and Israel is continuing its military offensive in Gaza. So what additional leverage will you use to get Hamas and Israel to end.
Our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate
The
manpower.
third phase is the end of the war.
torn down barriers,
The only one
blocking
that
them.
wants the war to continue is Hamas. Number one.
Oh, shut up.
They're the only ones standing out. We're still pushing hard
Community-based
to
engagement.
get them to accept. In the meantime, what's happening
Biden is so full of it.
in Israel?
He is.
The only thing I've denied Israel
Are in
was
5
the
states.
2,000-pound
It's very
bombs.
painful
They
to
don't
listen to two
work very well in
liars.
populated
It
areas.
is.
A lot of
And then
innocent
for
people.
each of them to call the other one a
Everybody
liar
Israel
when they
the
both
weapons they
lie.
need and when they need them. And by the way, I'm the guy that organized the world against
Trump
Iran when they
looking like
had a
Mussolini
full-blown
again.
Yeah.
ballistic missile attack
I mean, look at
on
that.
Israel.
Mussolini.
No one was hurt. No one Israeli. They're two different things. Hamas cannot be allowed to be continued. We continue to send our experts and our job is how we can get Hamas. You don't have to do it. By the way, they've been greatly weakened, Hamas, greatly weakened, and they should be. They should be eliminated.
Come
But you've
on,
got-
Genocide Joe. You know you've been
Getting
talking
back to
about
Ukraine
this
for 1
shit.
second. We have an ocean separating us. The European
And we
nation
literally have no military agreement with
spent 100
Israel
billion
either.
or
So
maybe
why are
more
we
than that, less than
arming
us.
a country
Why
that
doesn't he call
we have
them
no
so he
military
he put
treaty
up
or
the money like
military
I did with
agreements
NATO? I
with?
got them to put up hundreds of billions of dollars. The Secretary General of NATO said Trump did the most incredible job I've ever seen. You wouldn't. They
Yeah,
wouldn't
sure.
have any. They were going out of business. We were spending almost 100% of the money was paid by us. He didn't do that. He's getting all. You got to ask these people to put up the money. We're over $100 billion because we have an ocean in between. You got to ask them. As far as Israel and Hamas, Israel's the one that wants to go. He said the only one that wants to keep going is Hamas. Actually, Israel is the one, and you should like him because he's a very bad
Well, to
Palestinian.
be honest, Netanyahu did send suitcases
Biden, you
of
have a minute?
cash into
so much
the Gaza
foolishness.
Strip to
This is a
give
guy who
to
wants to get out of NATO.
Hamas.
He
You
did.
stay in NATO, he's going to pull out of NATO. The idea that we
That
have
was confirmed by
our
Ron
strength
Paul.
lies in our alliances as well. It may be a big ocean, but
Even in
have you ever had to
09, he
avoid
was
war
saying that
in Europe. Or major
09,
war in
2000,
Europe?
like
What happens
before he retired from Congress, he said that
continue to go into NATO.
Netanyahu and the Israeli government were sending
Agreement. Attack on one is attack on all.
suitcases full of cash
Want to start the
into
nuclear war he
the
keeps
Gaza
talking
Strip
about, go
and
ahead.
into the
Let
West
Putin
Bank
go in and control
to divide the
Ukraine,
Palestinian
and then
populations.
move on to Poland and other places. You see what happens then. He has no idea what the hell he's talking about. And by the way, I got 50 other
Motherfucker,
nations
you don't even
around
know
the
what the
world,
hell you're talking about half the damn time.
including Japan and South Korea, because they understand that this kind of dislocation has a serious threat to the whole world peace. No
just
major war in
mumbles.
Europe has ever been able to be contained just here.
I know. It's like, what the hell?
Leverage would you use to get Hamas and Israel to end the war?
Well, I would have
Being their sugar daddy for one.
diplomacy from the beginning. I think we have to recognize a couple of things. One is we're a nation of compassion. All of us are heartbroken by seeing the bloodshed that's happening in Gaza, horrified by the injuries to the civilians in Gaza and the damage to the innocents in Gaza. We also have to understand that Israel is in an existential battle now, and that Hamas, which is a genocidal organization, which is pledged to Israel's annihilation.
No, he's still giving
It's
the same
pledged to the
bullshit.
Oh,
extermination.
yeah.
He needs
And
to
it
get
does
away
not
from
want
Rabbi
a
Shmuley.
two-state solution.
Exactly.
It wants a one-state solution,
He
which
needs
is
to get away
Israel
from the
and
Israeli
it
house
actually
club.
has in
Yes.
its charter a provision that said, oh, Israel's in a five-front war with Hamas, which is a proxy of Iran, with the Shia.
Actually, Hamas is a proxy of Israel.
Which is these are all proxies of Iran. In Lebanon.
Meanwhile, I'm the one over here winning the debate.
And it's being attacked on two fronts right now. It is at full war with Hezbollah. And we have to let Israel disarm Hamas. We have to support them. Israel's our oldest ally. It is the only
Oh,
democracy in the
Me, me,
Middle East.
me,
oh,
me, me, me,
bullshit,
me.
If you can
bullshit,
imagine what
bullshit.
a world would be like without Israel for the first time in 80 years.
They have
People
never
are
been our
entertaining
ally.
that
They
possibility.
secretly
And in
hate
5
us
or
and
10
they
years,
love us
Israel made
because
thousands in
we're their
1967
sugar
and
daddy.
1956,
Yes.
etc. Hezbollah is the most proficient guerrilla army in the world and probably in history. Iran is now a
And here we are cheering them
and has the
Yeah.
capacity to
Okay, wait, he's talking some
maintain
truth.
a war. So we need
He's talking about Hezbollah now.
Yeah,
to
and he's
support
telling the
Israel, but
truth.
we need to use diplomacy, and the people in the White House are not capable of doing that. We need to bring in
Hey, that's finally
President
something he
Xi
said that makes
and
sense.
President Putin. We even need to be negotiating with Iran. And the neocons in the White House see this as us as a bipolar world where the United States is dominating the world and won't negotiate with anybody. And that is the problem that caused this.
Back to
You're right.
CNN.
He's right about that.
About time he told some half truths.
Yeah.
State in order
Yeah,
to
when it
achieve
comes to
peace in the
Israel,
region.
I'd have to see.
About time.
He's full of shit
we
when it
do
comes
that,
to Israel
the problem we
He
have
is.
is
because
that we
he's
spend
under
all the
that
money.
influence of
So they kill
Rabbi
us on trade.
Shmuley.
Made great trade
I
deals
think
with the
he's under
European
the
nations
influence of some money.
because if you add
That's
them up,
it.
they're about the same size economically.
And that, my friends, is where
I
dump the
changed
corruption comes in.
The big thing I
Mhm.
changed is
Exactly.
they don't want to pay. And the only reason that he can play games with NATO is because I got them to put up hundreds of billions of dollars. I said, and he's right about this. I said, no.
He is telling,
I'm not
Trump
gonna
is
support
actually
NATO
telling
if
the
you don't
truth here about this
pay.
one thing.
He asked me that
I
question.
will give him
You
the
brought us
benefit of
deals
the
with
doubt.
Russia at a very secret meeting of the 28
Without the U.S., Russia, I
states at
mean,
that
NATO
time,
would be
nations
nothing.
at that time. And they said, no,
Of
if you
course.
don't pay, I won't do that. And you know what happened? Billions and billions of dollars came flowing in the next day and the next months. But now we're in the same position. We're paying everybody's bills.
The question was actually, would you support an
There's no
independent?
lies detected there.
I'd like to answer the NATO question. I think that
You've got 2
Disband
minutes.
NATO, abolish it.
Never said in 1959, if we do our job with NATO, it will be gone in 10 years. And NATO has now become an instrument for the neocon ideology, which is the ideology that is bankrupting our country. It's bankrupt. We have a huge military budget. We have double the military budget that we had in real dollars and at the height of the Cold War. That money is not being used for self-defense. That money is being used for world domination and to make America the police of the world. NATO is the instrument of that. I'm going to change. I'm not going to abolish NATO. I'm going to change the function of NATO so that it becomes an
extensive climate change.
Would you support an independent Palestinian state?
I think that has to be decided between Israel and Palestine.
Back to CNN.
Democracy. Some of them stormed the Capitol to stop the constitutionally mandated.
I get so tired of hearing about January 6th.
I don't.
You swore an oath to, quote, preserve, protect, and defend, unquote, the Constitution. What do you say to voters who believe that you violated that oath through your actions and inaction on January 6th and worry that you'll do it again?
Well, I don't think too many believe that. And let me tell you about January 6th. On January 6th, we had a great border. Nobody coming through, very few.
Changing the
On
subject.
January 6th, we were energy independent. On January 6th, we had the lowest taxes ever. We had the lowest regulations ever. On January 6th, we're respected all over the world. All over the world, we're under this man's leadership is horrible, including weaponization, which I'm sure at some point you'll be talking about, where he goes after his political opponent because he can't beat him fair and square.
You have 80 seconds left. My question was, what do you say to those voters who believe that you violated your constitutional oath or your actions on January 6, 2021, and worry that you'll do it again?
Well, I didn't say that to anybody. I said peacefully and patriotically. And Nancy Pelosi, if you just watch the news from 2 days ago, on tape to her daughter, who's a documentary filmmaker, they say, she's saying, oh, no, it's my responsibility. I was responsible for this because I offered her 10,000 soldiers or National Guard, and she turned them. They turned it down. I offered 10,000 because I could see I had virtually nothing to do. They asked me to go make a speech. I could see what was happening. Everybody was saying they're going to be there on January 6th. They're going to be there. And I said, you know what? That's a lot of people coming. You could feel it. You could feel it too. And you could feel it. And I said, they ought to have some National Guard or whatever. And I offered it to her. And she now admits that she turned it down. And it was the same day she was, I don't know, she can't be very happy with the daughter because it made her into a liar. She said, I take full responsibility for January 6th.
President Biden?
Look, he encouraged those folks to go up on Capitol Hill, number one. I sat in the dining room off the Oval Office. He sat there for 3 hours.
So every day, millions of Americans struggle just to make ends meet. For many
by his vice president and a number of us on the Republican side as well to do something. Call for stop to end it. Instead, they've talked about these patriots and great patriots of America. In fact, he says he'll now forgive them for what they've done. They've been convicted. He says he wants to commute their sentences and says that no. He went to every single court in the nation. I don't know how many cases, scores of cases, including the Supreme Court. And they said, no, this guy could be a bloodbath.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
What they've done to some people that are so innocent, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. What you have done, you've destroyed the lives of so many people. When they ripped down Portland, when they ripped down
so you still have
many other cities. You go to Minnesota, Minneapolis, what they've done there with the fires all over the city. If I didn't bring in the National Guard, that city would have been destroyed. When you look at all of they took over chunks of Seattle. I was all set to bring in the National Guard. They heard that. They saw them coming and they left
Completely off the subject.
immediately. What he said about this whole subject is so off. Peacefully patriotic. One other thing, the unselected committee, which is basically two horrible Republicans that are all gone now out of office, and Democrats, all Democrats, they destroyed and deleted all of the information they found because they found out we were right. We were right. And they deleted and destroyed all of the information. They should go to jail for that. If a Republican did that, they'd go to jail.
Thank you, President Trump. President Biden, I want to give you a minute.
The only person on this stage is a convicted felon is the man I'm looking at right now. And the fact of the matter is what he's telling you is simply not true.
But he wasn't looking at him, though.
There was no effort on his part to stop what was going on up in Capitol Hill. And all those people, every one of those who were convicted deserves to be convicted. The idea that they didn't kill somebody, just went in and broke down doors, broke the windows, occupied offices, turned over desks, turned over statues. The idea that those people are... Come on. I asked him the first two debates we had, the first time around. I said, will you denounce the Proud Boy? He said, no, I'll tell them to stand by. The idea he's refusing, will you denounce these guys? Will you denounce the people we're talking about now. You denounce the people who attack that capital. What are you going to do?
Medicare, Medicaid, they're putting them in our hospitals.
Well, January
They're taking
6th
place of our
obviously doesn't
citizens there.
apply to you, but
They're doing
when
to the age
would
of veterans.
you
It's unbelievable. Veterans are living in the
bring in the
street,
National
and
Guard?
these people are living in luxury hotels.
Let me comment on what they were saying.
It's really coming back. I've never seen such anger in
Or
our country.
to uphold the Constitution.
The idea that
They're
veterans
both wearing American flag pins on their vests, on their lapels. That's easy to do. That's an accessory. That's an accoutrement. It is a. It's a badge of patriotism. But real patriotism means protecting the United States Constitution. And when both of them subverted the right to free speech, which are the most important right. President Biden, 37 hours after he took the oath of office, was ordering social media sites to censor his political opponents. I'm not just talking about me, and I'm not just talking about COVID, but on all kinds of issues like Ukraine, et cetera. This has never happened in American history. He opened a portal. The FBI, the CIA, CISA, NIH, DHS, the IRS, and other agencies go in and tamper with social media sites to take out things that were not politically palatable. They violated freedom of worship, the two of them, by shutting down every church in this country with no scientific
to make childcare more
affordable. They were not scientifically based. They shut down the Seventh Amendment right to jury trials by saying you couldn't sue somebody who was involved in COVID countermeasures, no matter how negligent that corporation was, the biggest corporations in the world. No matter how reckless their behavior, no matter how grievous your injury, you could not sue them. They shut down 3.3 million businesses with no due process and no just compensation in violation of the Fifth Amendment. They shut down the prohibitions against warrantless searches and seizures with this track and trace surveillance. That was the all-out assault on the Constitution that we've never seen the likes of that at any time in American history. And I don't believe they have the right to wear those American flag pins. That is.
I think Bobby has the best of that exchange.
Yes.
After a jury convicted you of 34 felonies last month, you said if reelected, you would, quote, have every right to go after, unquote, your political opponents. You just talked about members of the select committee on January 6th going to jail. But your main political opponent is standing on stage with you tonight. Can you clarify exactly what it means about you feeling you have every right to go after your political opponent?
Well, I said my felon, his son is a convicted felon at a very high level. His son is convicted, going to be convicted probably numerous other times. Should have been convicted before, but his Justice Department let the statute of limitations lapse on the most important things. But he could be a convicted felon as soon as he gets out of office. Joe could be a convicted felon with all of the things that he's done. He's done horrible things. All of the death caused at the border, telling the Ukrainian people that you're going to want $1 billion or you change the prosecutor. Otherwise, you're not getting $1 billion. Have I ever said that? That's quid pro quo. That we're not going to do anything. We're not going to give you $1 billion unless you change your prosecutor having to do with the son. This man is a criminal. I did nothing wrong.
Thank you, President Trump. President, you have said, I'm coming right to you, sir. You want to respond? Fine, go ahead. I'll give you a minute to respond.
The idea that I did anything wrong relative to what you're talking about is outrageous. It's simply a lie, number one. Number two, the idea that you have a right to seek retribution against any American just because you're president is wrong. It's simply wrong. No president's ever spoken like that before. No president in our history has spoken like that before. Number three, the crimes that you are still charged with. Think of all the civil penalties you've got. How many dollars do you owe in civil penalties for on the night while your wife was pregnant? What are you talking about?
Your minute, sir.
I didn't have sex with a porn star, number one. Number two, that was a case that was started and moved. They moved a high-ranking official at DOJ into the Manhattan DA's office to start that case.
If I'm given another
It
4
appealed
years,
and
I will
won.
be the best. I think I'll be the
He had a
best.
very
Nobody's ever
terrible judge.
be in an economy like us. Nobody ever cut taxes like us.
We're all
He's the only one I know who wants to raise your taxes.
Democrats appointed people,
He
and
wants to raise everybody's
both the
taxes
civil
by 4
and the
times. He
criminal.
wants the Trump
He
tax cuts.
basically went after
for
his
everybody.
political
If you believe
opponent
the two of you
because
are gonna pay
he
4
thought it was
to
going to
5
damage me. But when the public found out about these cases, because they understand it better than he does, he has no idea what these cases are.
Taxes, as I
But
said,
when they found out about these cases, you know what they did? My poll numbers went up way up. You know that because you're reporting it.
The worst
And we took in more money in the last 2 weeks than we.
President Biden. Well, the fact of the
Millions of dollars came pouring in because the public knows it's a scam and it's a guy that's after his political opponent because he can't win fair and square.
Thank you, President.
Again, the question doesn't really apply to you. But what do you think about the lawsuits against Donald Trump?
Here's what I say. President Biden made the point. His federal governmental
He's in
power,
a situation where he
abuse of
talks
power,
about how he has not
to
raised
use that to punish or disadvantage his political opponents. President Biden is doing that every day.
now you want a new tax bill.
They've denied me Secret Service.
Which is going to fundamentally bankrupt the country.
President Biden, I'm the first candidate since my father was killed. My father was killed. Secret Service became available. Political candidates prior to the convention.
We are the lowest trade deficit in
33
China.
political candidates have been given that
Thank you,
prior to
President.
100.
Thank you, President
That
Biden.
off.
Let's discuss an epidemic
Take that off.
affecting millions of Americans. The both of you have made a top
Most of them with
priority in your
polling
first
numbers
term.
tiny
The
fraction of
opioid
what I have.
crisis for both of you.
So President Biden, I am the
overdose
first
deaths in
candidate
the country
since
has gone
19
up. Under your term, it went up. Under your
West
term,
Secret
it's
Service
gone up.
protection,
Former
which
President
has
Trump,
been
despite
denied.
the
And
efforts
that
you
is a
have
way
made,
of
more
using
than 100,000 Americans are dying
weaponized
from overdoses
federal
every
aid
year, primarily from fentanyl and other
punish a
opioids.
political
What will you
opponent.
do to help
I
Americans
I
right
think
now in the
President
throes of
Trump
addiction?
was right. I'm not a fan of President Trump. I'm running against him. I think he was a bad president.
We now have the largest deficit.
But
in the history
he's
of our
right.
country.
It's shocking.
We have the largest deficit with China.
51 CIA agents
China. He's a Manchurian candidate.
signed
From
this
China.
document
So I think he's
saying that the Hunter Biden laptop was a Russian hoax.
because
And they were accusing the Russians of
also in China.
money.
He never took it away. He can't.
Sue me in virtually every state.
Tremendous.
Take
Every
me off
state
the ballot.
industries, and there was
That's
more-
not democratic.
He hasn't done that. But he
You
hasn't
know, you know,
because he can't, because it's too much money. But he's got the largest
A
deficit.
couple of days ago, let me just finish this. President Biden
The worst situation.
criticizing and ridiculing Vladimir Putin
You keep allowing them
for
to do
getting
what they're doing
88% of the
to us
vote
as
in
a
Russia.
country. They are
Kennedy,
killing
I'm
us as a country.
hold you to
But
the
the way,
time
let me
limit.
just finish this point. The way that Putin got 88% of the vote
Seconds left. The question was
by censoring his opponents on state-owned television, all the national TV networks,
We're doing very well in addiction.
and by making sure they didn't get on the ballot.
In 2.5, almost 3
We
years.
should not be doing that here in this country.
Any
We should
country,
be an example
everywhere.
of something better.
One scoring across the board. You know, it started doing because we got great equipment. We bought a certain dog. That's the most incredible thing.
I should also add something we are doing that
We did a lot.
I don't think we should be doing. We said the rules would be the same for you as for them. I've been asking my ear to give you more time, but I don't think that's right. So I'm going
I believe is even
to
low.
stop doing that. Back to
Gotaways, they don't even talk about gotaways.
President Biden, you have said, quote, Donald Trump and his MAGA
And you've been trafficking
Republicans
in women.
are determined to destroy American democracy. Do you believe that the tens of millions of Americans who are likely to vote for President Trump will be voting against American democracy?
Is the
More
largest
than
ever had
they
by
know
far.
about what he's done, yes. More they know, you know he has a real problem. And so the fact that I wanted to make sure that there's a machine today that I'm going to seek retribution. Never hearing the president say that I thought Hitler had some good ideas. What got me involved to run in the first place after my son died, I decided in Iraq, because of Iraq. I said I wasn't going to run again until I saw what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia. People coming out of the woods carrying swastikas on torches torches and singing the same anti-Semitic bile they sang back in Germany. And the young woman got killed. I spoke to the mother, and they asked him, they said, what do you think of those people? The people who ones who got killed and tried to stop it, and the ones he said, I think they'll find people on both sides. What American president would ever say? Nazis coming out of fields carrying torches,
Americans in the throes of
singing
addiction right now.
anti-Semitic bile, carrying swastikas.
That's pretend.
Or fine people.
Remain in Mexico.
The guy who says Hitler's done
He had
some.
to catch and release. I made a catch and release in Mexico. Now
President
catch
Trump.
and
Jake, both of
we had so many
you know
things.
that story's been totally
hard negotiations
wiped
with
out.
Mexico. I got it all for nothing.
because when you see the sentence, it said 100% exoneration on this. So he just keeps it going. He says he ran because of Charlottesville. He didn't run because of Charlottesville. He ran because it was his last chance. He's not equipped to be president. And you know, and I know this is ridiculous. We have a debate. We're trying to justify his presidency. His presidency,
before I take office, I said,
without question, the worst
as soon as I win the election,
the worst presidency in the history of our country. We should be having a debate about it. There's nothing to debate. He made up the Charlottesville story, and you'll see it's debunked all over the place. Every anchor has every reasonable
people that
anchor
essentially
debunked it. And
Trump
just
is
the other day,
lying again.
it came out where it was fully debunked. It's a nonsense story. He knows that, and he didn't run because of Charlottesville. He used that as an excuse to run.
Address concerns
President Biden,
this job.
all you have to do is listen to what was said at the time. And the idea that somehow that's the only reason I ran. I ran because I was worried a guy like this guy could get elected. If he thought there were good people coming out of that forest, carrying those woods, carrying those torches, then he didn't deserve
Okay,
to
Steve
be
G.
president. Didn't deserve to be president at all.
Peace out.
And the idea that he's talking about all this being fabricated. We saw with our own eyes. We saw what happened on January 6th.
Yes, Brandy,
We
Kennedy has
saw
no room to
breaking
talk.
windows. We saw people
We
on
need
the
to debate Stein West.
his own vice president. Look, there's a
I'm probably
reason
got to
why
smoke some weed after this.
40 top cabinet.
We invented those chips, and we lost them because he
You put your nail on that. You put the hammer on that nail perfectly. 70% of the American public say they don't want this contest because neither of them are running on the things that are the absolute only thing they have. The only argument they have is be scared of that other guy. He's a felon. He's a bad guy. He's going to destroy the republic.
right now in the United States created.
They're running on fear. Out of fear, they're going to vote out of these guys. If they want to vote out of hope, they're going to vote out of me because I want to talk. I want to talk about the fact that 71% of the people in this country are making less than the cost of basic human needs. I want to talk about the fact that under their administrations, the top 1% of Americans now own more and the 60% that represent the American middle class. To elderly people who are cutting their prescription bills into to make it through the week. Mothers who are downgrading their purchases at the grocery store to make it out of the checkout.
Why is he not supporting Medicare for all then?
Because he said it was too heavy a lift.
They're
But
in
we'll
their
get to that
bedroom,
later.
or in their living room with a crying baby, arguing with each other about whether that baby is $50
Because we're not going to let him get away with a lot of
sick or
things
$500 sick before they bring it to
before
the
this is
hospital.
over.
These are kids who come up to me every day and say that one day a week they have to choose between buying gasoline and buying lunch. These are choices you're not supposed to have to make in this country. And it's them, these two, who are not telling the American people how they're going to get our kids into homes. And that's what I want to talk about.
Yeah, he got them on that too.
30 years ago, actually, I'm probably a little bit lighter.
Welcome back to the CNN presidential debate live from Georgia. Let's talk about the assistant challenges you both faced in your first terms, and you'd certainly face again in a second term. It's more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes. And Black Americans are imprisoned at 5 times the rate of white Americans. What do you say to Black voters who are disappointed that you haven't made more progress?
The fact of the matter is, there's more small Black
Yeah,
businesses
the fact of the matter is,
than any time in history.
I get tired of hearing that line.
The wages of Black unemployment is the lowest level it's been in a long, long time. Number 3, we're trying to provide housing for Black Americans and dealing with the segregation that exists among these corporate.
Excuse me, didn't he campaign on, but didn't he work with segregationists?
The impact of
That was a long time ago.
The
Of course he did.
choice that Black
He was
families
a
have to
big
make
friend of
relative to
Strom
child
Thurmond.
care is incredibly difficult. When we did the first major piece of legislation in the past, I was able to reduce Black child care costs. I cut them in half. We got to make sure we provide for child care costs. We got to make sure because
You sure about that, Biden?
Child care protections.
Yeah, he is sure about that. But on the other hand, when they passed that bill, they made it only temporary.
There's more to be done.
Because they wanted to use it as a campaign issue.
But we've done a great deal so far.
And they never really fought to renew
You have 49
tax credits for families.
seconds left. What do you say to Black voters who are disappointed with the progress so far?
I say time home buyers should get a $10,000 tax credit to be able to buy their first home so they can get started. I made sure that we're in a situation where all those Black families and those Black individuals who provided had to take out student loans that were ballooning, that if they
His
were
promises
engaged
never
in
be
nursing,
trusted because he never,
anything having to do with
he
volunteers.
never keeps his promises.
They paid their bills for 10 years.
I don't even think he remembers what he promises.
All the
I don't
rest
think he
should be
remembers
after 10
also.
years.
Where's the $2,000 check?
He's blaming inflation.
I know, right?
And he was
And he's
promised
right.
the
It's been
$2,000
very
check.
bad. He caused the inflation, and it's
And
killing
they got
Black families and Hispanic families and just about everybody. It's killing people. They can't buy groceries anymore. They can't. You look at the cost of food where it's doubled, it's tripled, and quadrupled. They can't
Oh,
live.
that's ridiculous.
They're not living anymore. He caused this inflation.
Food
I
prices
gave him
have gone up.
a country
Feel
with
it every
no
single
essential
week.
good. All he had to do is leave it
Every
alone.
single
He
month.
destroyed it with his
They've gone up
Green New Scam and all of the other, all
They
this
haven't
money
doubled
that's
or
being
tripled.
thrown out the window. He caused
Just full
inflation.
of shit.
As sure as you're sitting there, the fact is that his big kill on the Black people is the millions of people that he's allowed to come in through the border. They're taking Black jobs now, and it could be 18, it could be 19, and even 20 million people. They're taking Black jobs, and they're taking Hispanic jobs, and you haven't seen it yet, but you're going to see something that's going to be the.
When I became president, you know why? The economy was flat on its back, 50% unemployment. He decimated the economy, absolutely decimated the economy. That's why there was no inflation at the time. There were no jobs. Provided thousands of millions of jobs for individuals who were in all communities, including
A
minorities.
bunch of part-time
He
jobs
made
is
sure
what they.
that they have health insurance.
There were a bunch
We
of
have
part-time
covered-
jobs, but he's
the
wrong
ACA
about the
has increased. I
50%.
made sure that
It never got up.
$8,000 per person in a family get written off for health care.
It'd get up to
This guy wants
25%.
to eliminate that. They tried 50 times. He wants to get rid of the ACA.
I want to get rid of the ACA.
I put more. We put
It was a
police on the street than every
disaster from the start.
has. Put in
It was a
equity in
disaster from
making
the
sure
start.
people
It
have
was a
a
giveaway
shot to
to
make it.
health insurance
There's a lot
companies and
going on,
drug
but
companies.
in inflation, he caused it by his tremendous malfeasance in the way he handled the pandemic.
He caused the
So
inflation.
trying to pass
No,
on
I
a
don't
similar
think so.
question. I don't know why they single out black people, but it's certainly true that some minorities in America do not do as well as us white people. And should government do something about that?
And I agree
running out of soldiers. They've lost so
with
many
the
people.
assessment
It's
that
so sad.
inflation is
They've lost
disproportionately
so many people, and they've
hurting
lost
black
us
people
gorgeous
because
cities
they're
with
wage
golden
earners.
homes that are 1,000 years
They've
old,
got
all because of
disproportionately
stupid decisions. Russia
fixed
would have
income.
never
The
attacked.
border is disproportionately hurting black and Hispanic workers. I hear that every single day. I spent 10 years working with Cesar Chavez during the last part of his life.
I would have much
He had
rather
two issues.
accepted
One was pesticides, disproportionate impact of pesticides on Hispanics. The other issue was the border. He understood all of these illegal immigrants coming across the border were hurting the capacity of his workers, American workers,
then
get good jobs and wages.
I wasn't really going
The issue
to
that they didn't talk
until I saw the
about, two issues. One is education. We spend $50 billion a year on the Department of Education, and black kids in this country, it's a crime what is happening to their schools. When I was a kid, we had the best educated kids by every measure of any country in the world. We're now 22. We're throwing billions of dollars, and in inner city schools, 1 out of every 4 black men has had some contact with the correctional service. And 60% of the blacks in American jails are there for nonviolent drug offenses. Why? Because President Biden passed the Drug Act in 1986 that he wrote that gave 100 times the penalty for crack cocaine as powder cocaine. It was designed to put blacks in jail. Then he passed in 1994 omnibus crime bill with the super predatory provisions, the mandatory sentencing, the 3 strikes you're out. Those 2 bills doubled the amounts of blacks in American prison. The amounts of blacks in American prison.
And communities across the country are confronting the devastating effects of extreme heat, intensifying wildfires, stronger hurricanes, and rising sea level. Former President Trump, you vowed to end any action as president to slow the climate crisis.
Let me just go back to what you said about the police. How close the police are there. Almost every police group in the nation from every state is supporting Donald J. Trump. Almost every police group. And what he's done to the black population is horrible, including the fact that for 10 years he called them super predators. We can't, in the 1990s, we can't forget that. Super predators was his name. And he called it to them for 10, and they've taken great offense at it, and now they see it happening. But when they see what I did for criminal justice reform and for the historically black colleges and universities, where I funded them and got them all funded, and the opportunity zones with Tim, as you know, Tim Scott was incredible. He did a great job. Great senator from South Carolina. He came to me with the idea, and it was a great idea. It's one of the most successful economic development acts ever in the country. Opportunity zones, and the biggest beneficiary are blacks, and that's why we have the best numbers with them in maybe ever.
Look,
they're saying ever. I read this morning or ever the best numbers.
The most important question of the night.
Much of the black population, because he's done a horrible job for black people. He's also done a horrible job for disaster.
I mean, this guy is just totally unacceptable.
President Trump, will you take any action as president to slow the climate crisis?
So I want absolutely immaculate clean water, and I want absolutely clean air, and we had it. We had H2O. We had the best numbers ever. And
this guy's a liar.
we did.
I know.
Were using all forms of energy, all forms, everything. And yet, during my 4 years, I had the best environmental numbers ever. And my top environmental people gave me that statistic just before I walked on the stage, actually.
I don't know where the hell he's been. The idea that anything he said is true. By the way, black colleges, I came up with $15 billion for HBCUs, historic black universities and colleges, because they don't have those.
He's not answering the question either.
contributors that they have to
Oh, these guys.
any black student is capable in college of doing any white student can do.
What they both did for the
Jobs in
climate was
high-tech.
pitiful.
We're in a situation where the idea
Pitiful.
that he is claiming to have done something that had the cleanest water, cleanest water. He hadn't done a damn thing for the environment. He pulled out of the Paris Peace Accord, Climate Accord. I immediately joined it because if we reach 1.5 degrees Celsius at any one point, where there's no way back. The only existential threat to humanity is climate change.
Except you keep sending money and weapons and all that shit to Israel and Ukraine, which is fueling the climate crisis. Let's really address the elephant in the room. Why is the military-industrial complex not
United States
held to account for the
because
climate
I
crisis
didn't want to waste that money
create
because they
when
treat
they
us
are the
horribly. We were the
worst
only ones who was
polluter
costing
of
us money.
any
Nobody else was
industry in
paying
the
into it.
world.
And it was a
Second
disaster.
to the fossil fuel
But
industry.
everything that he said just now, I'll give you an example. I heard him say before insulin. I'm the one that got the insulin down for the seniors. I took care of the seniors. What he's doing is destroying all of our medical programs because the migrants coming in, they want everybody. And look, I have the biggest heart on the stage. I guarantee you that.
Oh, bullshit.
And I want to take care of people, but we're destroying our country. They're taking over our schools, our hospitals, and they're going to be taking over Social Security. He is destroying Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
The idea is that we, in fact, we were the only ones of consequence who were not members of the Paris Accord. How can we do anything? We're not able to, the United States can't get us under control. One of the largest polluters in the world. Number one, we're making significant progress. By 2035, we will have cut pollution in half. We have made significant progress, and we're continuing to make progress about pollution and about climate.
Yeah, you talk about pollution and the climate, yet you send bombs and shit to other countries which are fueling this shit. If there were no bombs being shipped abroad, the pollution would not be a thing.
Pharmaceutical company
but
cannot have to
he's
pay.
made almost
And by the
no
way,
progress, okay, in the area of
this is frustrating.
facing
This is your
the climate
specialty,
crisis.
but I object to CNN's bias.
What's he
question.
spent?
Did you take any action to slow
His
the climate
program over
crisis
10
that
years.
assumes climate change is a
It
crisis?
amounts to
So you think it is? And
500 billion.
I think that climate change, first of all, I want to say this. There's been nobody who's ever
He
run for
needed to
president
have a
in the
program
United States
that would spend
gotten
at least
anywhere.
50
Well,
trillion over 10
I'll even
years.
say it more definitively, who has a strong environmental record, a larger commitment to the environment than I do. It's what I've been doing for 40 years. I believe climate change is existential, but I don't insist other people believe that. And I think I focus, and I've always focused on market-based solutions, which I think are the most efficient, eliminating subsidies for the energy industry, for the particularly carbon. We give carbon $5.2 trillion in subsidies a year and creating a national grid system that is robust enough to do long-haul transportation of electrons. That and we turn every American into an energy entrepreneur, every home into a power plant with the cheapest, most efficient forms of energy. The market, we need to start by protecting habitat, our air, water, wetlands, soils. That's the most important thing you can do for climate. It's almost all together ignored.
Well, the most important thing you can do for climate is to stop propping up the military-industrial complex and the fossil fuel industries.
Well, he's talking about removing the subsidies from the fossil fuel industry.
Oil industry.
Right? Did you hear that?
And to BlackRock.
Yeah.
And we should be focusing on restoring our soils, doing regenerative agriculture, protecting our air, our water, our wildlife. Stop stopping the carbon discharge from coal burning power plants, which are causing $500 billion in respiratory injuries annually, poisoning every freshwater fish in our country with mercury.
Sorry, your time is up. Back to CNN.
Okay, well, he had the best of that issue also.
Just to make
Yes, he did.
ends meet for many older Americans, Social Security
But he still wasn't
provides a critical
compelling.
lifeline. President Biden, if nothing is done to Social Security, seniors will see their benefits cut in just over 10 years. Will you name tonight one specific step that you're willing to take to keep Social Security solvent?
Yes, make the very well pay 6% of their income, of their paycheck, every single time they get a paycheck from the time of the first one they get.
Oh, bullshit.
When they're
Mint
18 years
platinum
old.
coins every
The
year.
idea that they're going to.
Exactly. It's like, you're full of shit.
Proposing that
Mint the fucking coin.
1%.
Absolutely.
So no one after, I would not raise the cost of Social Security for anybody
Absolutely.
under
We do overt
$400,000.
congressional
After that, it began
finance.
to make the wealthy begin to pay their fair share by increasing from 1% beyond to be able to guarantee the program for life.
So you still have 82 seconds left. Are there any other measures that you think that would be able to help keep Social Security solvent, or is that one enough?
Well, no, that one enough will keep it solvent, but defeat this man because he wants to get rid of Social Security. He thinks there's plenty to cut in Social Security. He's wanting to cut Social Security and Medicare both times, and if you look at the program put forward by the House Republican caucus that he, I believe, supports, is in fact want to cut it as well. The idea that we don't need to protect our seniors is ridiculous. And by the way, the American public has greater health care coverage today than ever before. And on the ACA, as I said, you're in a circumstance where 400,000 existing condition only allows them to have that insurance is the fact.
Now, we just
that
got
they,
stuck
in fact,
with a
are
copay
part
of
the ACA.
$1,125.
And by the way, the other thing is, we're in a situation where we talk about education for
Medicare for all eliminates copays, premiums, and deductibles.
Absolutely.
Another $8,000. So anybody making
and minting the coin solves that.
$1,000 a year is going to be able to.
Minting the coin solved that, and electing Bernie Sanders
towards the
president
tuition.
would have solved that.
He just doesn't know what he's talking about.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump.
So I've dealt with politicians all my life. I've been on this side of the equation for the last 8 years. I've never seen anybody lie like this guy. He lies. I've never seen that he can look you in the face. About so many other things too. And we mentioned the laptop. We mentioned Russia, Ukraine. Everything he does is a lie. It's misinformation and disinformation. The losers and suckers story that he made up is a total lie on the military. It's a disgrace.
Oh, he didn't make up the losers.
But Social Security,
story.
He's destroying it because millions of people are pouring into our country, and they're putting them onto Social Security. They're putting them onto Medicare, Medicaid. They're putting them in our hospitals. They're taking the place of our citizens. What they're doing to the VA.
President Biden?
The idea that veterans are not being taken care of, I told you before. And by the way, when I said suckers and losers, he acknowledged after that he fired that general. That general got fired standing with Trump when he said it, number one. Number two, the idea that we're going to be in a situation where all these millions and millions, the way he talks about it, illegal aliens are coming into the country and fastest growing economy in the world. The reason why we have the most successful economy in the world. We're doing better than any other nation in the world. And by the way, those 15 Nobel laureates he talked about being phony, those 15 Nobel laureates, economists, they all said that if Trump is reelected, we're likely to have a recession.
Right now, Iran is growing faster than we are.
Go up. And by the way, worst industry,
Russia's growing
59
faster
presidential scholars voted him the worst
China's growing
president in the history of the
we are.
United States of America.
Again, a very important question, Dodge. Social Security is going bankrupt.
Oh, shut
The rich more.
No,
There's
it's
no
not,
way
you
in
moron.
hell Social Security or Medicare can go bankrupt.
do.
Well, I agree with you. And Social Security is not
Of
an
course he
entitlement.
agrees with
Social
him. He
Security
doesn't know anything about MMT.
workers
He's an
Right.
MMT
their
ignoramus.
income into a
We have three MMTers right here.
into a fund.
Exactly.
There's not an entitlement. It is contractual, and the government, the United States government, would be outrageous if the United States government did not live up to its full faith and credit.
They do get Social
To
Security
reach
checks.
outside of the Social Security system to get it, and what
Social
we
Security
need
is
to
a
be doing is
universal.
winding down our military commitments. We need to unravel the war machine. We need to solve our chronic disease epidemic, which is the biggest cause, 4.3 trillion. And we can do those things very quickly. I'm going to cut the military budget in half during my first 4 years. I'm going to use AI and blockchain to eliminate waste in government to save more money. And I'm going to get rid of the chronic disease epidemic. And ultimately, that's going to save us a lot of money. And this has to be a priority for us. I also want to
If
say
he passed
this,
the Medicare for All bill, he would save 50%
I was
per
astonished
year
by
within 3
President
years
Biden's
of
claim that
passage.
we have the best economy in the world. We have, I see kids every day. None of this generation is going to get into a home. And that's going to destroy the American middle class. The American middle class, the greatest economic engine in the history of mankind. I was a kid. Our country owned half the wealth on the
Not
face
quite.
of the earth.
BSDNC is in
one,
panic mode.
We had an industrial base after World War II, but most importantly, we got every American into a home. And because they were in a home, they had equity. They could borrow money. They could bet it on a business.
Back to CNN.
And that's what's going to drive our economy.
The American families struggle to afford. President Trump, both you and President Biden have tried to address this issue, but the average cost of childcare in this country has risen to more than $11,000 a year per child. For many families, the cost of childcare for 2 children is more than their rent.
The other thing is, he doesn't fire people. He never fired people. I've never seen him fire anybody. I did fire a lot. I fired Comey because he was no good. I fired a lot of the top people at the FBI, drained the swamp. They were no good. Not easy to fire people. You'd pay a price for it, but they were no good. I inherited these people. I didn't put them there. I didn't put Comey there. He was no good. I fired him. This guy hasn't fired anybody. He never fires. He should have fired every military man that was involved with that the Afghanistan horror show, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country.
So he raises a false
He didn't fire.
issue.
Did you fire anybody?
How
Did
many
you fire
people
anybody
did Biden
that's
fire
on the border
compared to me?
that's allowed us to have the worst border in the history of the world? Did anybody get fired for allowing 18 million people, many from prisons, many from mental institutions? Did you fire anybody that allowed our country to be destroyed? Joe, our country is being destroyed as you and I sit up here and waste a lot of time on
Boy,
this
what a
debate.
narrative.
This shouldn't be a debate. He is the worst president. He just said about me because I said it. But look, he's the worst president in the history of our country. He's destroyed our country. Now all of a sudden he's trying to get a little tough on the border. He came out with a nothing deal, and it reduced it a little bit, like this much. It's insignificant. He wants open borders. He wants our country to either be destroyed or he wants to pick up those people as voters. And I don't think we just can't let it happen. If he wins this election, our country doesn't have a chance, not even a chance, of coming out of this rut. We probably won't have a country left anymore. That's how bad it is. He is the worst in history by far.
Number two, the idea that we're talking about worst presidents. I wasn't joking. Look it up. Go online. 159 or 58, don't hold me the exact number, presidential historians. They've had meetings and they voted who's the worst president in American history, one through best to worst. They said he was the worst in all of American history. That's a fact. That's not conjecture. He can argue they're wrong, but that's what they voted. The idea that he is doing anything to deal with child care, he did virtually nothing to child care. We should significantly
Jill's
increase the
live.
child care tax credit. We should significantly increase the availability of women and men or single parents to be able to go back to work. And we should encourage business.
Was about what would you do to make childcare more affordable, if you want to take your minute.
Just so you understand, we have polling, we have other things that they rate him the worst because what he's done is so bad. And they rate me, I'll show you, I will show you. And they rate me one of the best, okay? And if I'm given another 4 years, I will be the best. I think I'll be the best. Nobody's ever created an economy like us. Nobody ever cut taxes like us. He's the only one I know. He wants to raise your taxes by 4 times. He wants to raise everybody's taxes by four times. He wants the Trump tax cuts to expire. So everybody, including the two of you, are going to pay 4 to 5 times. Nobody ever heard of this before. All my life, I'd grow up and I'd see politicians talking about cutting taxes. When we cut taxes, as I said, we did more business. Apple and all these companies, they were bringing money back into our country. The worst president in history by far, and everybody knows it.
President Biden?
Look, the fact of the matter is that he's dead wrong about, he's increased less than $400,000. I didn't. But this tariff is 10% tariffs. Everything coming into the country, you know what the economists say? That's going to cost the average American $2,500 a year more because they're going to have to pay the difference in food and all the things that are imported. Number two, he's in a situation where he talks about how he has not raised, he somehow helped the middle class. Middle class have been devastated by you. Now you want a new tax cut of $5 trillion over the next 10 years, which is going to fundamentally bankrupt the country. You had the largest deficit of any president in American history, number one. Number two, you have not, in fact, made any contact, any progress with China. We are at a low.
CNN has somehow found a child America. Somehow Americans raised children for years. Now there's a crisis because it costs too much. That's something government did or can fix?
Well, the reason there's a crisis is because the economy with the middle class is gone. So in order to pay for a home, you need 2 jobs or 3 jobs. So oftentimes I'm running into people who have 4 jobs between the couples. The couple used to be when you and I were growing up, mom stayed at home or a parent stayed at home and took care of the kids. That doesn't happen anymore. Now, both parents, in order to hold on to that home, need to be working. So we do have a child care crisis in this country. And it's because of the destruction that both these men contributed to of the American middle class, and neither of them is offering any way to restore the middle class. Child care for Black Americans, John, is 37% of income. A single child. But I'm actually going to do it because why? Because it's existential. If we don't have the courage to do that, no matter what the cuts are, we have to do that or we are going to cease to exist as an influential nation. And but we cannot cut our way out of this debt. We have to build new industry. We have to build GDP. And one of the most efficient ways of building GDP is through child care, through guaranteed child care. There's a
Green New Deal.
22 times return on investment. As I said, every $1 million we spend on military weapons creates 2 jobs. Every $1 million we spend on child care creates 22 jobs. And we need to grow. Taking away $500 billion from the military.
Back to the CNN debate.
It's discussing
I don't think he had his numbers right.
Americans
But
that
I
both of
think
you
the
have made a
general
top
idea
priority in your first term,
was
the
right.
opioid crisis. And for both of you, the number of overdose deaths in this country has gone up. Under your term, it went up. Under your term, it has gone up. Former President Trump, despite the efforts that both of you have made, more than 100,000 Americans are dying from overdoses every year, primarily from fentanyl and other opioids. What will you do to help Americans right now in the throes of addiction who are struggling to get the treatment they need?
To finish up, we now have the largest deficit in the history of our country under this guy. We have the largest deficit with China. He gets paid by China. He's a Manchurian candidate. He gets money from China. So I think he's afraid to deal with them or something. But do you notice he never took out my tariffs because we bring in so much money with the tariffs that I imposed on China. He never took them away. He can't because it's too much money. It's tremendous country. And he's got the worst situation with China. China's going to own us if you keep allowing them to do what they're doing to us as a country. They are killing us as a country, Joe, and you can't let that happen. You're destroying our country.
So President Trump was, what are you going to do to help Americans in the throes of addiction right now who are struggling to get the treatment they need?
Jake, we were doing very well at addiction until the COVID came along. We had the 2.5, almost 3 years of like nobody's ever had before, any country in every way. And then we had to get tough. And it was the drugs pouring across the border it started to increase. We got great equipment. We bought the certain dog that's the most incredible thing that you've ever seen. The way they can spot it. We did a lot. And we were getting very low numbers, very, very low numbers. Then he came along.
Mr. bought a dog.
The numbers, have you seen the numbers now? It's not only the 18 million people that I believe is even low because the gotaways, they don't even talk about gotaways. But the numbers of the amount of drugs and human trafficking in women coming across our border now is the largest we've ever had by far.
President Trump, thank you. President Biden?
Fentanyl and the byproducts of fentanyl went down for a while. And I wanted to make sure we use the machinery that can detect fentanyl, these big machines that roll over everything that comes across the border. And it costs a lot of money. That was part of this deal we put together, this bipartisan deal. More fentanyl machines, more be able to detect drugs, more numbers of agents, more numbers. Republican colleagues said, don't do it. It's going to hurt me politically. No, he never argued it's not a good bill. It's a really good bill.
Well, somebody
we
answer
need
the
those
question.
machines.
I know,
need
right?
those machines. Yeah. And we're coming down very hard in every country. In
Why
Asia,
bother asking a question,
precursors
right?
for fentanyl.
I mean,
and Mexico
these
is working with us to
moderators
make
are
sure
ridiculous.
they don't have the technology to be able to put it together. That's what we have to do. We need those machines.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump, and again, the question is about Americans in the throes of addiction right now, struggling to get the treatment they need.
Answer the frickin' question.
This does pertain to it. He ended remain in Mexico. He ended catch and release. I made it catch and release in Mexico, not catch and release here. We had so many things that we had done, hard negotiations with Mexico, and I got it all for nothing. It's just like when you have a hostage, we always pay $6 billion for a hostage. Every time we say there's a hostage. Now we have a hostage, the Wall Street Journal reporter.
I seem to recall
I think
a
a good
promise
guy.
from Trump that Mexico would
He's
pay for the
over
wall.
there because Putin is laughing at this guy.
I haven't seen
probably asking for billions of dollars for the reporter. I will have him out very quickly. As soon as I take office, before I take office, I said by literally as soon as I win the election, I will have that reporter out. He should have had him out a long time ago. But Putin's probably asking for billions and billions of dollars because this guy pays it every time. We had 2 cases where we paid $6 billion for 5 people. I got 58 people out, and I paid essentially nothing.
What's he talking about?
I like it when they cut them off on CNN. The question is, we do have a big opioid problem, people in crisis, people overdosing. But also people in pain who can't get pain relief because doctors are afraid of the DEA. What would you do?
Both of these presidents miss the point. They're talking, you could bring enough fentanyl across the border in a briefcase to kill everybody in Los Angeles. So the fentanyl is going to come in this country. The problem is something much larger than that.
My brother died from fentanyl.
It's a generation that is alienated, that is dispossessed, that is depressed, that is suicidal, that is disconnected from community. And that's why they're turning to drugs. And we need a signature policy.
Thank you,
Is to begin taxing marijuana federally by to deschedule it from Schedule 1, where it is now, where the federal government is not allowed to tax it. So marijuana is legal in many states. It's legal. It's not going to, whether you can tax it or not, is not going to affect the number of people who are using it or amount that's used.
Treat it as alcohol and tobacco.
And it could start collecting taxes. That will raise $8.5 billion in revenue. I'm going to dedicate that money to building drug rehabilitation farms.
No, you're not. You're going to delete it upon receipt, just like every other thing that gets collected.
In rural areas all over this country where any American go for free to deal with depression, suicidal behavior, or alcoholism, drug addiction, to illegal drugs, but
see,
also
folks, this is what happens when you have Joe Firestone in your ear.
Adderall. We need to reclaim our children. We have a whole generation that's growing up with social media, that's growing up with no hope for their future. They can't get into homes. They can't get meaningful jobs.
2 minutes, Mr. Kennedy. Back to CNN.
Let's turn to concerns that voters have about each of you. President Biden, you would be 86 at the end of your second.
I spent half my career being criticized being the youngest person in politics. I was the second youngest person ever elected to the United States Senate.
Oh, there's the
the
Mussolini look
This
again.
guy's 3 years younger and a lot less.
Stick his chin
confident.
out.
I think that just look at the record. Look at what situation he left me. As I said, 15 million new jobs, 800,000 manufacturing jobs, more investment in America, over billions of dollars in private investment in enterprises that we are. Well, the whole idea of computer chips, we used to have 40% of the market. We invented those chips, and we lost it because he was sending people to find the cheapest jobs overseas and then bring South Korea. I convinced Samsung to invest billions of dollars here in the United States, and guess what? Those fabs they call that to build these chips. Those fabs pay over $100,000. You don't need a college degree for them. And $40 billion already being invested and being built right now in the United States, creating significant jobs for Americans from all over the world.
President Biden, you have 40 seconds left. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I would. The idea that somehow we are this failing country. I never heard a president talk. Well, name me a single major country president who wouldn't trade places with the United States of America for all our problems and all our opportunities. We're the most progressive country in the world in getting things done. We're the strongest world who keeps our word, and everybody trusts us. All of
lying son of a bitch.
Exactly.
And our
God.
Those who he cuddles up to, from Kim Jong-un, he sends love letters
Talk
to.
about living in
stop
they
it.
don't want to screw around with us.
What fucking world
Thank
does
you.
he live in?
Former President Trump.
I don't know.
To follow up, you would be 82 at the end of your second term. What do you say to voters who have concerns about your capabilities to serve?
Well, I took 2 tests, cognitive tests. I aced them, both of them.
Of
as
course
you
he
know.
did.
We made it public. He took none. I'd like to see him take one, just one, a real easy one. Like go through the first 5 questions. He couldn't do it. But I took 2 cognitive tests. I took physical exams every year. And, you know, we knock on wood wherever we may have wood, that I'm in very good health. I just won 2 club championships, not even senior, 2 regular club championships. To do that, you have to be 50 yards. I think I'm in very good shape. I feel that I'm as in good a shape as I was 25, 30 years ago. Actually, I'm probably a little bit lighter, but I'm in as good a shape as I was years ago. I feel very good. I feel the same. But I was willing to take a cognitive test. And you know what? If I didn't do well, I aced them. Dr. Ronnie Jackson, who's a great guy when he was White House doctor. And then I took another one, a similar one. And
President Biden?
You can see he is 6'5" and only 223 pounds, or 235 pounds. Well, you said 6'4", 200.
Oh, come
well, anyway,
on.
that's it. Anyway.
Food
Let's
fight.
take a look
Food
at what he
fight.
says he is.
Exactly.
What he is. Look, I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. I got my handicap, which when I was vice president.
Oh, please.
Shit his fucking pants is what he'd be doing.
And, by the way, I told you, I'm happy to play golf if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it?
That's the biggest rider. He's a 6 handicap of all.
I was at 8 handicap.
Yeah.
8.
President Trump, we're going to
21
turn.
Let's not act
merciful when they cut them off now.
It is merciful.
All I got to say is I hope they let me on the stage for that contest.
What do you do to stay healthy? What do you do to stay healthy? What do you do to stay healthy?
What do I do? I hike every day. I don't ever eat processed food. And I do intermittent fasting. And I really want to be part of that contest.
CNN?
Big concern that voters have about you. Will you pledge tonight that once all legal challenges have been exhausted, that you will accept the results of this election, regardless of who wins, and you will say right now that political violence in any form is unacceptable?
Well, I shouldn't have to say that, but of course I believe that. It's totally unacceptable. And if you would see my statements that I made on Twitter at the time, and also my statement that I made in the Rose Garden, you would say it's one of the strongest statements you've ever seen. In addition to the speech I made in front of, I believe, the largest crowd I've ever spoken to. And I will tell you, nobody ever talks about that. They talk about a relatively small number of people that went to the Capitol, and in many cases were ushered in by the police. And as Nancy Pelosi said, it was her responsibility, not mine. She said that loud and clear. I'd be here right now. I'd be at one of my many places enjoying myself. I wouldn't be under indictment because I wouldn't have been his political opponent, because he indicted me because I was his opponent. I wish he was a great president. I would rather have that. I wouldn't be here. I don't mind being here. But the only reason I'm here is he's so bad as a president. We're a failing nation right now. We're a seriously failing nation. And we're a failing nation because of him. His policies are so bad.
No, we are a failing nation.
His military policies are insane.
We are a failing nation in
They're
part
insane.
because of him.
These are wars that will never
We're
end with
also
him.
a failing nation because
He will drive us into World War III, and we're closer to World
we're also
War
a failing
III
nation
than
because of
anybody
the
can
number of
imagine. We are
presidents that preceded
very,
that.
very close to World War III, and he's driving
Going
us
back
there.
40 years.
And Kim Jong-un and President Xi of China, Kim Jong-un of North Korea,
I need a
all of these,
cigarette.
Putin, they don't respect him. They don't fear him. They have nothing going with this gentleman, and he's going to drive us into World War III.
You want a World War III, let him follow and win, and let Putin say, do what you want, NATO. Just do what you want. There's a thing called Article 5. An attack on one is attack on all, and required response. I can't think of a single major leader in the world who wouldn't trade places with the job I've done and what they've done. We're needed. We're needed to protect the world because our own safety is at stake. And again, you want to have a war, just let Putin go ahead and take Kyiv, make sure they move on, see what happens in Poland, Hungary, and other places along that border. Then you have a war.
President Trump, as I come back to you for a follow-up, the question was, will you accept the results of this election, regardless of who wins?
They took a lot of land from Bush. They took a lot of land from Obama and Biden. They took no land, nothing from Trump, nothing. He knew not to do it.
He won't.
Not going to play games with me. He knew that. I got along with him very well, but he knew not to play games.
He won't answer the
He
question.
took nothing from me. But now he's going to take the whole thing from this man right here. That's a war that should have never started. It would have never started ever with me. And he's going to take Ukraine. And, you know, you asked me a question before, would you do this? He's got us in such a bad position right now with Ukraine and Russia.
Well, Trump is
because
right
Ukraine's
about
not winning that war. He said, I will never settle until such time. They're running out of people. They're running out of soldiers. They've lost so many people. It's so sad. They've lost so many people, and they've lost those gorgeous cities with the golden domes that are 1,000 years old. All
regardless of who wins, yes or no, please.
If it's a fair and legal and good election, absolutely. I would have much rather accepted these, but the fraud and everything else was ridiculous. And if you want, we'll have a news conference on it in a week, or we'll have another one of these in a week. But I will absolutely, there's nothing I'd rather do. It would be much easier for me to do that than I'm running again. I wasn't really going to run until I saw the horrible job he did. He's destroying our country. I would be very happy to be someplace else, in a nice location someplace. And again, no indictments, no political opponent stuff, because it's the only way he thinks he can win. But unfortunately, it's driven up my numbers and driven them up to a very high level because the people understand it.
Let's see what your numbers are when this election is over. Let's see. You're a whiner. When you lost the first time, you continued, you appealed and appealed to the courts all across the country. Not one single representation, all this stealing. There is no, I doubt whether you'll accept it because you're such a whiner. The idea, if you lose again and you accepting anything, you can't stand the loss. Something snapped in you when you lost the last time.
And that's it for the CNN debate. This is your forum. You get the final word. But just one observation is that listening to them, America is in terrible decline. But I don't see people risking their lives to leave America or to go to many other countries. They want to come here. And you say the middle class, mostly because they're going into the upper class. I think America pretty well, and we just need you politicians to leave us alone.
I do want to make an observation about President Trump's final point, which I think is a very, very important answer to nuclear war right now and at any time since 1962. This week, we did something extraordinary that was hardly covered by the press, which is we fired a missile in coordination with Ukraine into a series of missiles into Crimea with cluster bombs, which every nation in the world except for us and North Korea says is a war crime. We dropped them on a civilian population, people who were sitting on sunning themselves on the previous week. The Russians are in Cuba firing missiles because they've warned us. We are going to lose the war in Ukraine. I've said that from the beginning. We cannot beat Russia in the Ukraine. They cannot allow themselves last time they were invaded, the Russians killed, or the Hitler killed 1 out of every 7 Russians. They're not going to let us put NATO in Ukraine. They cannot do it. It's absolutely critical for their national security, and we need to recognize that. And we are pushing toward a war with a nuclear power that says they will use nuclear weapons if they're pushed to the edge. They have 2,500 more nuclear weapons than we do. They have better defensive weapons, and we cannot fight a world war anymore because of hypersonic missiles. We couldn't get 1 million men across the Atlantic. Even worse, we do not have an industrial base like we did before World War II. We can't create weapons anymore. We create small numbers, but nothing like the Chinese or the Russians. This is something that every American needs to understand how close the incompetence of this administration has brought us to war.
Closing
shut up,
statements now.
but let me.
We have closing statements from.
Can I say?
You'll get your closing statement right after they get there.
It is now time for the candidates to deliver their closing statements as predetermined.
The debacle that was left by President Trump in his last term. We find ourselves in a situation where, number one, we have to make sure that we have a fair tax system. I ask anyone out there in the audience or anyone out watching this debate, do you think the tax system is fair? The fact is that I said nobody even making under $400,000 had a single penny increase in their taxes, and will not. And if I'm reelected, that'll be the case again. But this guy has increased your taxes because of the deficit. Number one, he's increased inflation because of the debacle he left after the way he handled the pandemic. And he finds himself in a position where he now wants to tax you more by putting a 10% tariff on everything that comes into the United States of America. What I did when, for example, he wants to get rid of the ability of Medicare for us to be able to negotiate drug prices with the big pharma companies. Well, guess what? We got it down to $35 for insulin instead of $400. No more than $2,000 for every senior, no matter the exorbitant prices. I'm going to make that available to every senior all along. It's happening now, and everybody in America. He wants to get rid of that. I'm going to make sure that we have child care. We're going to significantly increase the credits people have for child care. I'm going to make sure we do something about what we're doing on lead pipes and all the things that are causing health. Continue to fight to bring down inflation and give people a break.
He's full of shit.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump, you now have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Like so many politicians, this man is just a
his
complainer.
delivery on
He
that
said, we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to get rid of this tax, that tax. But he doesn't do anything. All he does is make our country unsafe by allowing millions and millions of people to pour in. Our military doesn't respect him. We look like fools in Afghanistan. We didn't stop Israel. It was such a horrible thing that would have never happened. It should have never happened. Iran was broke. Anybody that did business with Iran, including China, they couldn't do business with the United States. They all passed. Iran was broke. They had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah, for terror. No money whatsoever.
Shut up.
Again,
that's bullshit,
Ukraine
right?
should have never happened.
Exactly.
He talks about all this stuff, but he didn't do it. For 3.5 years, we're living in hell. We have the Palestinians and we have everybody else rioting all over the place. You talk about Charlottesville. This is 100 times Charlottesville, 1,000 times. The whole country is exploding because of you, because they don't respect you, and they have to respect their president, and they don't respect you throughout the world. What we did was incredible. We rebuilt the military. We got the largest tax cut in history, the largest regulation cut in history, even from a medical standpoint, right to try, where we can try space-age materials instead of going to Asia or going to Europe and trying to get when you're terminally ill. Now you can go and you can get something. You sign a document. They've been trying. What we did for the military was incredible choice for our soldiers, where our soldiers, instead of waiting for 3 months to see a doctor, can go out and get themselves fixed up and readied up and take care of themselves. History of the VA. So all of these things, we're in a failing nation, but it's not going to be failing anymore. We're going to make it great
I know.
again.
And he ran out of time. Mr. Kennedy, 2 minutes, closing statement.
13, there was a poll taken that asked young people under 35 in this country, are you proud of the United States? 85% said yes. The same poll taken 5 months ago, 18%. Of these two presidents, an entire generation of Americans has lost pride in our country and a hope.
I'm one of them.
And they
I'm of that
feel
demographic.
that way because they see what's happening. They can't get into a home. First generation in history in America that has been able to live worse lives than their parents. They see the vitriol that you saw here, the division, the polarization that makes them disgusted with politics. They're seeing
Why do you think I'm going for Jill
torture,
Stein? Because I'm sick and tired of the
has
two-party
transformed
system.
our agencies from the CIA, the health agencies, the environmental agencies, into sock puppets, the industries they're supposed to regulate. They're seeing the destruction of our soils, the destruction of our air and water. They're watching this happen, and the politicians do nothing about it except for hate on each other. If you want more of the same, you should vote for President Biden, President Trump. You know what's going to happen. You know to completely change. You're going to support me because I'm going to change everything. And this is a moral fight. This is a moral battle for the soul of our nation to restore our moral authority around the world by projecting economic power abroad rather than spending $8 trillion on regime change wars that have left every nation we've touched worse off than we found it. And restoring our moral authority here at home. The first day in office, I'm going. You heard what they're going to do. You don't even understand it. Here's what I'm going to do. Day one in office, I'm going to issue an executive order saying any federal official who tells a lie to the American public will lose his job. By our agencies of the American public, I'm going to unravel the war machine. I'm going to unravel the corrupt merger of state and corporate power. I know how to do it. I've been litigating against these agencies for years, and I'm uniquely there. I'm going to make sure that our Constitution is protected, that AI is deployed to make government more transparent rather than by government to enslave the rest of us. I'm going to bring AI home and blockchain home because we need these. This is something that these two aren't even talking about. But if you want everything to change, you'll support me. If you want to vote out of fear, you need to support one of those guys. If you want to vote out of hope, out of inspiration, out of pride in your country, out of restoring the nation, you should vote for me. Thank you very much.
At least he got to have a studio audience to cheer him on.
Yes, he did.
Crowd here, obviously, is very supportive of this candidate. Thank you for watching this different kind of debate. I don't know what you learned, but well on a debate is election betting.
Who was that
And I
guy
can
that was
report
moderating that
after this,
part?
Oh, that's John Stossel.
Kamala Harris and Mr.
Oh, wow.
Kennedy.
I haven't seen him in a long time.
I
Thank
know,
you and
he's
good
a real jerk.
night.
Okay, so let's get away from that now. And let's talk about the impressions, our impressions of the debate. And also, let's talk about what was not talked about, okay, in this particular debate. Okay, so would you like to start, Greg?
It was, well, between Biden and Trump, I would say, and Kennedy, it was a disaster. I wish they would have included Jill Stein, then it would have been a whole lot better. I wish they were all four on the stage. With the Libertarian candidate, I haven't heard anything about their nominee at all to hear his standpoint on it. But to exclude Kennedy, to exclude Stein, West, and any of them just on some stupid shit, it's just insane to support the two major party system.
Okay, D?
Yeah, I don't even know what to say. You don't really have a debate. All you have is theatrics for who the people are that follow that particular candidate.
Yes.
So you don't have people having to answer the question.
When they get asked a question and they go off on some tangent, okay, to deflect, those microphones should have been silenced.
Yes, they should have.
At that point, okay, the moderators should have cut off the mic and should have said, look, you're not answering the question.
Mm-hmm.
Either answer the question or get off the stage.
That's how it should be. It shouldn't be a show for your group of people.
They shouldn't be able to deflect and not answer questions, go
Exactly.
on to completely other subjects. Okay, that was terrible.
It was.
Okay. Now, uh, with respect to Bobby, he did try to answer the questions. Okay, in each case. Okay, where is this coming from?
What's that?
Okay, whose mic is this coming from? Oh, sorry.
What are you talking about?
Okay, I had the debate on, okay, the real debate on. What they were doing was repeating it, and that's what we were hearing.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it might have been their audio that they were using.
So anyway, let's go on.
It was a three-ring circus.
Yes, I thought it was a free ring circus too. Okay, but what I have to say though relates mostly to Bobby Kennedy, because I think if you look at the three of them and you look at the Kennedy responses, I think that he did a much better job, okay, than the other two. But of course, he had the advantage that he wasn't getting responses from the other two. Because, of course, he was thrown out of the debate. So he decided to have this this real debate thing, okay, which was kind of a meta debate. And so he was able to escape without any challenge from the other two as to what he was saying. So he looked better. I think he looked much more presidential than either of the other two. I mean, I don't think it was any contest. Trump continually looked like he was a Mussolini type. I mean, his body language was just awful throughout the whole thing. And Biden looked like he didn't have a grasp, okay, of anything.
No.
He just looked like he was incapable of handling the presidency anymore. Okay, I don't know if he was ever capable of handling it, but he certainly didn't look like he was capable now. And Trump didn't look like he was capable either, because he was basically baffling people with bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he was doing. Okay, he was lying continuously, telling half truths, continuously making outrageous claims. In one case, he said that someone gave me that statistic just before I got on the stage, but he never told us what the statistic was.
No.
He never said anything about the statistic. He just said it was the best in my presidency.
Everything was the best.
Yes, everything was the best. There was absolutely nothing wrong with my presidency.
Right. Everything he does is the best.
Was why I got beaten in 2020. Because there was nothing wrong with my presidency. Because I was the greatest president ever. And that's why Biden was able to beat me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and even if you believe that the presidential election of 2020 was rigged, and Biden did not actually win, it was certainly a close race. Okay, and the point is, if Trump had been the greatest president ever, it wouldn't have been a close race at all. It would have been a landslide in favor of Trump. So Trump was absolutely full of crap in terms of the debates, but also we know both of them are just unacceptable. In the years to come, is Trump really capable of handling the challenge of China and Russia and just the world changing? It's not really about challenges of Russia and China. It's about the dynamics of international relations, the economics, the politics, and the military dynamics, all changing before our eyes. Mm-hmm. And we have a nation that has to adapt to these changes and get along, with other nations. Are either of these two candidates capable of helping us do that?
No.
No.
They aren't capable of getting us into any peace agreement with Russia, with China, Iran, any country that the government, which views as an adversary, which many of us here do not. Like, we see them, from the environmental standpoint, how strong I am for the climate matters.
Yes.
We can reach true peace through a global Green New Deal, stop all these wars, have Putin, have Xi Jinping, whoever's going to be elected in Iran, and even every other country that the government sees as an adversary. We can be working together on peace, and it's going to take the Green New Deal.
Okay, I entirely agree. But of these three candidates, which would be the closest, to getting us there?
Oh, shit. That's a hard pill to swallow there.
Okay, I don't think it's a hard pill to swallow, because there are other candidates, and I'm not for a minute saying we shouldn't consider the other candidates. Okay, but what I am saying is we have to look at these three candidates and say which one survived this particular debate as a possible presidential candidate.
I would say Kennedy.
Me too.
Yes, and that's what I would say too.
But he needs to get out from under the influence of the pro-Zionist lobby and Rabbi Shmuley. He needs to distance himself and make himself look like the anti-Zionist candidate out of the three and all that.
He absolutely does. He has to come out before a position that if Israel survives, it has to be a regular nation. It has to give up the biblical fantasies. It has to live in peace, with its neighbors, and it has to be collaborative, with its neighbors. It has to accept, a Palestinian state. It has to get the settlers out of the Palestinian areas. They do not belong there. They're illegally there according to international law. They have to get out. The facts on the ground have to give way to international law. That has to happen, or there will never be peace in that area.
Well,
And
Canada, I have to.
has to recognize that.
Yes. Canada just recently I saw had is sanctioning Daniela Weiss and several of the different groups. You know, those settler groups.
Yes.
It was quite interesting. But yeah, the things have to change, and like we've said, we don't know between now and November how things are going to be. But it looks like
right. Okay. We didn't know, but what we should say, I think, is that there are two other really decent people who are running.
Yes.
One is Jill Stein, and the other is Cornel West.
And
Now,
Claudia
right now,
and Karina.
I'm sorry?
And Claudia, who's running under the
yes,
Socialist Party.
I know Claudia, is pretty good, and her running mate is pretty good as well. But you've got three levels essentially here. With respect to Claudia, her chances of getting anywhere are, she's just somewhere completely out of the picture. I think that Cornell or Jill have at least a somewhat better chance, but I think that they are both also have only a very, very small chance to make an impact.
Mm-hmm.
Of the two, it seems to me that Jill has a better chance because I think she's better at politics than Cornell is. Okay, but the two of them lack money to get their message out. And that's just a reality. And if there's no dump the corruption campaign, they just don't have a chance to win. And we haven't been able to build a dump the corruption campaign. That's the reality of the matter. Also, with respect to Bobby Kennedy, I noticed that Greg rightly pointed out that Bobby has been taking big money.
Yes.
No question that he's been taking big money. But he's not been taking nearly as much big money as Trump and Biden.
True.
They're going to spend $3 trillion on this campaign, and Bobby is going to spend $500 billion on this campaign. So by any standard, Bobby is less bought. He's bought by fewer people. So
well,
I think that's a reality. But I don't want to let Bobby get away with something here.
Right.
I want to state very clearly what I think Bobby's problems are, what his shortcomings are. Okay?
This is something that Dee and I discussed, and along with Matt Waldy and I, and this has to go along with strategically thinking. And you remember the conversation that Cornel West should and Claudia should join forces with Jill Stein, and it would strengthen us instead of dividing us.
Yes, I remember that conversation, and I agree with it. If the three of them could come together, it would be a popular front that would be far stronger. But I still think, how many months do we have left? June is over. We have July, August, September.
Less than 4.5.
It's not 4.5. It's maybe 4 months and 1 week.
Yeah.
That's it. Okay. In the 4 months and 1 week, even with the three of them together, they would have to get their message out. And what kind of money do they have to do that? They're going to be swallowed up. They don't even have enough money to do door-to-door campaigns. Their ground campaigns are weak.
That's why D and I made a big suggestion that Cornell and his camp should get, like, he should talk to Jill Stein, be her vice presidential running mate, because he would be a good one. And then have Claudia and Karina and their teams have everybody all in one camp together, on the same page, same wavelength, and it would make the ground game much stronger. Take all the money and all the resources between the three and get behind Jill.
Yes.
That makes the most sense.
I completely agree. I think it makes the most sense. But I have to ask the question. Okay, among the three, if they put all their resources, together, have they even raised $15 million?
Probably not, but they can still have their supporters go out and knock on doors anyways.
They can have their supporters go out and knock on doors, but that costs something too. For example, look at Jill. She didn't get on the ballot in New York State. It was a completely unfair situation. But let's ask, why didn't she overcome the unfair situation? It was because she didn't have the money to do it. She didn't have the money to get on the ballot in New York State.
Because Como, when he was in office, he changed the rules and made it more difficult.
I know, but the point is Bobby Kennedy could get on the ballot in New York State because he had enough money.
Right.
And he could get on the ballot in all these other states because he had enough money. The first thing is to get on the ballot. The second thing is to have enough money to get your message out. Now, Bobby goes into the election with a monetary deficit of 6-1 compared to the other two.
And we also have the possibility of getting Marianne Williamson on board with Jill Stein.
I know, but she doesn't have any money either. In other words, the four of them together have no fundraising capability compared to the other three. I mean, we have to face that. Take a look at the the Bowman, that race, in New York. The AIPAC people
crushed
spent
him.
$15 million. He came in with $3 million. Now, there are other factors, involved in the race. The reapportionment in his district took lots of votes, away from him, and gave those votes to a centrist type of candidate.
Mm-hmm.
But he was outspent by 5-1 in that race. And that's one of the main reasons why he was beaten. As much money as Bobby Kennedy has, he's still going to be outspent by the two other candidates, each one at 6-1. But probably he still has at least a small chance to win. because other people who've had a 6-1 type of disadvantage have won. For example, Summer Lee, in her race won. Ocasio-Cortez, in her original race, she won. She was outspent by 6-1 also. There are lots of cases where people outspent by 6-1, have won. So probably Bobby Kennedy still has a chance. Okay, but if Cornell and Claudia and Jill
and Marianne,
and Marianne, let's say if they all came together, they could raise a total of $40 million. They would be outspent by Bobby Kennedy by more than 10 times. And by Trump and Biden by more than 60 times. Their messages would be totally lost.
Mm-hmm.
And we can do nothing about that unless we can build a dump the corruption campaign in 4 months.
And that's what we need to get Jason. We need to talk with Jason Call in a private call and get that message with Jill.
When you run a dump the corruption campaign, you have to be vicious about it.
Extremely. And,
in other words, you have to tell people, look, do you want your president to represent his donors or her donors? Or do you want him to represent you, the people? If it's a congressperson, do you want your congressman to represent a few donors? Or do you want them to care about you and represent you? And then you have to tell people, if you don't vote against the big money, they're going to represent the donors and not you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we don't have a democracy right now. You know we don't have a democracy.
Democracy
you all know we don't have a democracy.
Democracy in this country is a joke.
And why have we lost our democracy? Because you guys, the voters, won't vote against the people getting the big money. The only way to get the democracy back is to reject everyone who's taking the big money, every single one of them.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to get that thought into people's heads that they've got to go to the polls and they got to vote against people taking the big money.
Pull your head out of your asses, people.
And then choose among the people who are not taking the big money. That's the only way to give Jill Stein a chance.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only way to give Cornell a chance or Claudia a chance or the Libertarian candidate a chance. People have to get up on their hind legs and say, I'm not voting for the people who are getting the big money because they're not going to represent me. Until that message gets out, there's no chance.
Exactly.
So now let's talk about the reality. Let's do our best to get that message out. In the next 4 months and 1 week. But also, let's recognize the reality that we have, which is that as bad as Bobby Kennedy is, and I'm going to make the case against him in just a minute, he's still better than the two clowns who have been our past two presidents. They were both awful. And Trump has promised a dictatorship. Nobody asked him about that. Nobody said a word about that during the debate. But he's promised a dictatorship.
Mm-hmm.
And that promise was a serious one. It fits his personality, it fits his behavior, and it fits the Project 2025 plan that you talked about. If people do elect Trump, we're going to get a dictatorship in this country. And if people elect Joe Biden, we're going to get another kind of dictatorship in this country. One that manages the social media, one that completely manipulates the press, one that takes dissenting voices and crushes them.
Mm-hmm. Scott Ritter had something to say on X about it.
I'm sure he had something to say about it. In a way, Joe Biden is just as dictatorial as Trump. He's just more invisible about it, more
Yes.
quiet about it.
Right. He's polished from being in Washington. He's been in there for a long time, so
So he
he's
seems like he's more reasonable and he's willing to compromise. And he is willing to compromise with, in terms of the people around him.
right.
He's more willing to compromise. But he's not more willing to compromise when it comes to the public interest. He doesn't give
Exactly.
a damn about the public interest or the public purpose. He doesn't give a damn what people want. He doesn't care about people. If he cared about people, he would be in support of Medicare for all. If he
Exactly.
cared about people, he wouldn't have subjected us to the risk of nuclear devastation for the first time in more than 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't really had significant nuclear risk since the middle of the 1980s. And now we have it again. And
Yep.
who did that? Joe Biden did that. That
Exactly.
alone makes him totally unacceptable.
Right.
So
Well,
both of those guys are totally unacceptable. Now let's get into Bobby's negatives.
okay. Can I just interrupt you for a second? I'm gonna
Please.
say what Scott Ritter says. He says CNN assassinated Joe Biden's candidacy. This was a setup from the start. The Democrats were incapable of terminating Biden. CNN did the job for them. The elder abuse has come to an end. Maybe America can be saved from a commander in chief who long ago lost control of his senses.
Okay, I think that's a very good comment by Scott Ritter.
Scott Ritter has always been spot on.
Very much spot on, except when it comes, of course, to things like the debt and the deficit. Economics is not the strong point of Scott Ritter.
If I were Jill Stein, I would reach out to him in regards to the foreign policy deal and get him on board, because that would be a perfect match when it comes to foreign policy.
Okay, but you have to remember, Jill Stein already has Jeffrey Sachs aboard.
Yeah, well, they can have two people.
They can have two people aboard, but specifically where Jeffrey Sachs has to sit is as Secretary of State. Where Scott Ritter can sit is National Security Advisor and maybe Secretary of Defense. I think he'd make a good Secretary of Defense, but I think he'd make a great National Security Advisor also.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but Jeffrey Sachs he'd be the best Secretary of State we ever had. Okay, but that's another question. Okay, let's get into Bobby's negatives, which of course didn't come up here tonight. And I don't want to whitewash Bobby. I am, not about that.
Right.
So it won't take me very long to go through Bobby's problems that I've perceived. The first problem is he's opposed to getting rid of the filibuster because he says he doesn't want to interfere with the democratic processes of the Senate. Now, the filibuster is the most undemocratic process that we have in the Congress. We've got to get rid of it. If Bobby doesn't get rid of it, he will be paralyzed if he becomes the president of the United States. He's got to be talking against the filibuster. He should have been working against it from the first.
If I were a candidate running for president, I would be an advocate for elimination of the filibuster because there is no mention of it in the Constitution.
There's no mention of it in the Constitution. It's an anti-democratic practice which gradually developed, okay, in the Senate of the United States. And now it's been stopping progress. It's been stopping progress for a long time. It has to go. Secondly, with respect to Medicare for All, Bobby's position has been, well, he knows that Medicare for All is really good, but it's too heavy a lift, okay, politically. That's baloney. More than 70% of the people of the United States are in back of Medicare for All. If we had a president who was for it and who would fight for it, then enough of the Congress would come along to pass it, especially if the president got rid of the filibuster. Now, how can the president get rid of the filibuster? Okay, on day one, he can talk to the person who's going to be the majority leader of the Senate.
Eliminate the Senate parliamentarian.
Okay, and he can say to him, you don't have to eliminate the parliamentarian. I mean, you don't have to eliminate the parliamentarian because you don't have to listen to the parliamentarian. All the parliamentarian is a paid person. He or she doesn't have to be fired. You just don't listen to them if you think their advice is bad. They're just an advisor. Okay, but with respect to the filibuster, once you get rid of the filibuster, which you can get to by meeting with the majority leader and saying, look, I'm not going to support you for majority leader if you don't get rid of the filibuster. I'm going to come out against you, and I'm going to get somebody else as majority leader. And once you've won a big victory as president, you can do that, and you can get rid of the filibuster. Then once you get rid of the filibuster, you can pass Medicare for All if you have a majority in both houses. But you have to come out for it, and you have to get the presidential party in both parties of Congress to back it. Secondly, or thirdly, I should say, you have to take a position on taking big money from contributors and say, that's a no-no going forward. Now, I know I took big money to get here, but we all know we have to get the big money out of politics. So I, as president of the United States, am going to lead a dump the corruption campaign to lead voters to vote against people who are taking big money from any kind of contributor. And when I say big money, I mean contributions greater than $200. I'm going to lead a 4-year campaign, a continuous campaign, to mobilize the public to vote against everyone taking big money. From day one, that's going to be a major emphasis in my presidency and my campaign. I'm going to lead us to a political system that only involves small dollar donations. I think Bobby Kennedy's got to say that.
You're going to have to run a campaign that makes you stand out like a sore thumb.
Yes.
And dump the corruption, and calling out the corrupt whores is what it's going to take, especially when you're running for either your local level offices like school boards, county commissioners, city council, mayor, your state legislatures, your governors, your Congress and Senate, and the president. It's going to have to take every office of people calling out the corruption.
I agree. That's very true. And by the
Even
way,
the dog catcher.
Bobby is talking against a lot of the corruption. He's talking against it now. He's talking about removing corporate corruption in government. It's a main theme in his campaign. All he has to do is extend the anti-corruption aspect to a generalized kind of dump the corruption campaign. Then, the next thing he's got to do is he has a terrible position when it comes to federal debts and federal deficits and fiscal responsibility and federal spending. He's an ignoramus about how federal spending occurs. He's an ignoramus when it comes to the importance of federal debts, the level of federal debts, the level of the federal debt, and the level of the debt to GDP ratio. Both don't mean anything in terms of fiscal sustainability. They don't affect fiscal sustainability at all because the federal government, which includes the Federal Reserve, creates money. It creates money for the Treasury spending account, and it creates new money in the economy every time it spends. He needs to recognize that. So he needs not to be afraid of deficits and debts. And that is so important because deficit spending is definitely going to be necessary to meet the climate emergency. He can talk all he wants about cutting military spending in half. But even if he does that, he'll save only roughly $500 billion a year. That's not enough to meet the climate emergency. To meet the climate emergency, we're going to need something like $10 trillion per year. And that means there's got to be deficit spending. And he's got to recognize that. He's got to get real.
Mm-hmm.
In Bernie Sanders' program, he proposed over 10 years, $16.2 trillion spending. In Howie Hawkins' campaign, he proposed roughly $42 trillion. We've seen other proposals. Okay. The right wing has said if we're going to fight the climate emergency, we have to spend $100 trillion, and that's impossible. So we're not going to do anything about the climate emergency. That's what they say. I say they may be right that it's going to cost $100 trillion over 10 years. But guess what? We have the power of the purse. We can spend the $100 trillion over 10 years if that is necessary. That's going to grow the economy. It's going to create more tax revenue, which doesn't pay for anything, but it does drain money out of the economy so that you don't get inflation when you spend $10 trillion per year. And we're going to have to fight inflation while we're doing something about the climate emergency because it's going to require spending a fortune by the federal government. Bobby's got to recognize that. Any president has to recognize that. That's the reality. The final reality that he has to recognize, and that he's not even talking about, is he has to neuter the Supreme Court. He's not going to be able to pass any of the progressive stuff he's thinking about without neutering the Supreme Court.
It would take a total overhaul of the Supreme Court to get anything done.
Well, that's not true. And the reason why it's not true is because you can legislate, and using Article 3, Section 2, you can kick the Supreme Court out of the game. You can prevent them from judicially reviewing the legislation. So you can get that legislation passed. You can get legislation passed that limits contributions to campaigns. And you can do that in the first year if you can get the Congress behind you. The reason why Dump the Corruption is so important is you can kick out enough of the Congress people that you can get new people there, not beholden, to big money, who will support you in passing the kind of legislation you need to get rid of the big money and to cut out the Supreme Court. But for the long run, you're still going to have to neuter the Supreme Court. So what you have to do there is you have to expand the Supreme Court.
And restore checks and balances while you're at it.
And restore checks and balances while you're at it. Okay, what you have to do, though, is you have to add 6 more people to the Supreme Court to get 15 people on the Supreme Court.
Aren't there currently like 13 circuit courts in the country?
Yeah, something like that. Right. There are 13 circuit courts. You could expand the number of circuit courts, okay, as well. But you have to expand the Supreme Court. There's a bill in Congress now to expand it by 4. Okay, what that would do is give you a margin of 7-6, okay, on critical votes. But what happens if you make a mistake in appointing the 4 justices and you gain only 3 justices that way? Then it's 7-6 in favor of the conservatives. So you've got to guard against an error. That's why you need to add 6 justices, okay, to the Supreme Court, okay, in order to neuter the 6, okay, that we have now. That gives you, in theory, okay, a majority of 9-6. That's enough to silence them. Once they're stopped, they'll be resigning from the Supreme Court slowly over a period of years. Probably Thomas will leave. Most probably Sam Alito, okay, will leave also. Okay, but you got to get 9-6 first so that they can't possibly change things, okay, anymore. By the way, if you did Dump the Corruption, you won't have any problem legislating the Roe v. Wade. In other words, it would be easy to do that. Okay, you could finally get that, and you could stop the Supreme Court from interfering in that by using Article 3, Section 2, the Exceptions Clause. So, okay, in my view, to make Bobby a good president, he has to change his positions on all these areas. He's not thinking about that. Even in the area, okay, of the climate emergency, he's thinking he can fight the climate emergency with some relatively small programs, that emphasize cleaning up of the environment, okay, and regenerative agriculture. Those are important programs. I'm a big regenerative agriculture fan.
So am I, like hemp.
Yeah, big. I really like that about his campaign. By the way, that was a big thing for Bernie Sanders. It was in his platform also. Okay, so that emphasis is not a new emphasis, but it's a very important emphasis, and it's going to be very effective. I mean, just the use of hemp in agriculture is going to be very, very effective. But more has to be done, okay, than that. We need federal job guarantees. We need the people in federal job guarantees working on green stuff and environmental stuff, okay, all over the country. We need to modify the housing stock so that it is environmentally friendly.
One thing I think would be more environmentally friendly instead of building all these houses is take the current existing ones that are sitting vacant, renovate them.
Exactly.
I'm of the thought, like, if I were to go and purchase a new house, a house right now in general, I'd go and find me like an early, like late 1800s, early 1900s farmhouse, renovate it inside and out, and upgrade it to being modern, but keep the rustic charm of it, like a farmhouse. And then have me probably 15, 20 acres around me. So that way I can have me a nice garden, place to have like a swimming pool that if I want, a shop.
If we could do that for people who want that kind of thing, it'd be wonderful. Okay, it would be wonderful. There's lots of stuff in Kennedy's campaign, okay, that I really like. Okay, I like the emphasis on chronic diseases. But if he thinks that he can lower healthcare spending by 50% by ending the epidemic, he's sadly mistaken. Because you can figure out how to fight the diseases, but people still have to be able to go to doctors. They have to be able to learn, the methods. They have to be able to get the medical care free at the point of service.
Medicare for all solves all that too.
That's what I was going to say. He's got to have Medicare for all. He's got to fight for it. He's got to do the heavy lifting. And it's not going to be such a heavy lift for a president who's willing to mobilize the 70% of the population that's for Medicare for all. So I think he's got to do that. So these are the things that I think are wrong with his campaign and his particular stances. With respect to Israel and Palestine, I haven't said a lot about that. But I think it's easy to express your concern for Israel and your support for the Israeli people, while also expressing your support and concern for the Palestinian people and your insistence on Palestinian rights, including the rights of the Palestinians for self-determination and for a state, of their own. And I think the United States can do a lot to facilitate the transformation of Palestine so that that kind of thing, is possible. So you can maintain friendliness to Israel, but what you have to reject is the Netanyahu regime. And you have to be clear about your rejection of the right wing, in Israel. I think the President of the United States has to make it clear that he is not a friend of the religious fanatics inside of Israel.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, that he is not a friend of the settlers, that he's not a friend of their violations of international law, and that he or she is not a friend of their violations of Palestinian rights and their Nazi-like attacks on the Palestinians. We need straightforward statements, of that kind. I think such a president can still maintain their support for the independence of Israel and for Israel's right of self-defense. But Israel's right of self-defense does not translate to oppression of the Palestinians.
Exactly. It doesn't give them the right to ethnically cleanse and the genocide that's going on.
Right. That has to stop, and it has to immediately stop. And Kennedy should come out tomorrow calling for stopping of the genocide and making it clear that if he's elected the President of the United States, he will stop shipments of arms to Israel until Israel stops the genocide. And he should also make it clear he opposes any invasion, of Lebanon, and any invasion of the surrounding areas, and that he does not support the concept, okay, of a greater Israel.
Right, that these things have to be said.
They have to be said, and they have to be said very decisively and very positively and very strongly. And there has to be a serious commitment made to change that situation. The Israelis took the wrong road during the late 60s and early 70s. And it was a road that led them to apartheid and to the Nazi like activities that we see now in Palestine. That has to stop.
Exactly.
That is not for civilized people.
No. And the U.S. really is not doing anything to stop this.
They're pretty much accelerating it at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I
And
agree.
yes, and we're watching it. And statements made too with the Biden executive order, with certain groups that they were going to sanction, and we're still seeing the violence has intensified. We'll see how far Canada gets with its sanctions.
Okay, so I don't know how many people will have seen, okay, the Kennedy response. I think he was expecting, okay, that millions of people would come to see it. If that happened, I think that, okay, was very important, because I think to those millions it would be clear to them that he might be a minimally acceptable choice for president of the United States. Certainly much better than either Trump, okay, or Biden. And I think that would be an important change. It might actually persuade, okay, the Democrats that they had to kick out Biden and run a stronger candidate.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be an improvement. It would be an improvement. I still wouldn't be for that particular candidate, because it's the Democrats after all. And they've been moving us towards a totalitarian system in their own way. And they got to morph that.
I think tonight I was seeing where MSNBC was freaking out over Biden's performance.
Good.
And that was from JB with RBN on Twitter.
Yeah, well, JB is not exactly an MSNBC fan.
No, but he tuned in just to see what they were saying, and they were all freaking out. They were, according to what he said in the thread, they are turning on Biden after tonight.
Well, I hope so, because they need to turn against Biden. They need to get somebody else in there who's at least a minimally acceptable candidate. If
somebody
those
who's tolerable.
had any brains, if they had any brains, those people would turn to Jeff Merkley,
or even Marianne Williamson.
No, can't turn to Marianne Williamson. Not enough people know about her.
But I did hear from a libertarian source that I do follow that there is no law on the books here in the U.S. preventing a political party from recalling a primary on the national level and calling for a national primary. That could be done. It would take the DNC calling all 50 states, Secretary of States, into an emergency meeting right now, starting tomorrow, to begin that process. Because when is the primary supposed to, the convention?
I think the convention is August 19th, if I recall correctly.
Let me see here.
Fairly late, okay, in August. But the problem is, whoever they select, okay, for the Democrats, has to have enough of a name, okay, right now, that there would be a sufficient amount of time to make them known to people.
Okay, it is. They would have from now until. Well, they could have. Let me look at the calendar here for August. They can have the election on August the 6th. So that would give them 5, maybe 6 weeks of campaigning nationally.
They have the convention scheduled for August the 19th. So there's no official nominee, okay, until August the 19th.
But they can recall it tomorrow if they really thought about it. Do not put anybody tied to the Biden name. That means Kamala Harris cannot be picked. Nobody from the Clinton administration, the Obama administration, none of them can be picked because that would be a losing thing.
Okay. Good night, Evelina.
Yeah, good night, Evelina. But before you go, I did want to say something about your comments. Okay, you said, I just don't see Bobby Kennedy willing to upset the Zionists. And I don't think he's interested in Medicare for All or the Green New Deal, regardless of its popularity. Otherwise, he would have mentioned it in his campaign. Yes, I agree with all that. That's why I'm trying to push it. I'm trying to get people to mention it. I'm trying to make it more visible that he doesn't support, okay, those things, because I hope to change his mind about that. When you ask whether Marianne was decidedly pro-Israel, in the past she has been, okay, decidedly pro-Israel. I don't think it's widely known, but she's Jewish. Okay, I just sort of mentioned that. Okay. Now, as her campaign has evolved, okay, I've seen her be more explicit about Palestinian rights, okay, and the need for a Palestinian state. So I certainly think that now she's much more towards the international position about what should happen than she was at the start, and much more friendly to that position, okay, than Bobby Kennedy is. But I think if Marianne can move, then Bobby Kennedy can move too.
I wonder how
but he's been stubborn about that. He's just been so stubborn, when it comes to Rabbi Shmuley. I personally think that it's Bill Ackman. I think he's very friendly, with Bill Ackman, who's he's just a crazy Zionist. He was instrumental. He's a billionaire, of course, $3 or $4 or $5 billion, something like that, and a big contributor to universities. And he's been instrumental in getting the presidents thrown out of universities because they were being fair to the Palestinians. I mean, basically, that's what that was about. And I think Bill Ackman is close to the Kennedy campaign, and he may be the fly, in the ointment. I think Kennedy expected for a while, to be able to get the support of the Adelsons. But I don't think that worked out for him.
No, they're stuck on Trump.
Yes. Okay, you were going to say something.
How well known is Jeff Merkley nationally?
He is not very well known, but of course he has the track record of being in the Senate, okay, for a very long time. He's very close to Bernie Sanders. Every bill Bernie Sanders puts forward, there's Jeff Merkley supporting that bill. He doesn't disagree with Bernie about a thing, except that, of course, he's younger, he's healthy, he's moderately good looking. He looks like he might be an acceptable president, from the standpoint of the establishment. In other words, they might be able to swallow Jeff Merkley because they might think that they could handle Jeff Merkley. But I don't think anybody can handle Jeff Merkley. I think he has too much integrity for that. So I think from a progressive point of view, he's a very good candidate. He's kind of a quiet version, okay, of Bernie Sanders.
Well, if the DNC, I mean, they would have virtually 6 weeks and have like 2 primary debates set up within 3 weeks of each other, and let Jeff Merkley get on the debate stage to get his message out there.
Mm-hmm.
Then that would get him a lot of exposition in the debate.
And it would, yeah, go ahead, honey.
And he does seem to have the appeal of the centrist and the leftist wing of the Democratic Party, but I would vote in favor of him based on what you said, if it come down to that.
We would have to know, though, his position. He have to be very clear about his position, okay, on Israel, okay, in Palestine. Okay, but on the various issues that I mentioned, he would be closer to our position than Bobby Kennedy has been. And he might be much easier to convince to come over to our views than Bobby Kennedy has been.
Okay, well, he is pro-Palestinian.
Compared to others, yes. Compared to others in the Senate, he's among the small group that's for Palestinian rights.
I just found an article that he posted to Medium, and he did call back in February for a permanent ceasefire.
Yes, he did. And he's for a Green New Deal. And he's for ending the filibuster. And of course, he's strong for Medicare for all. Very strong for Medicare for all. I think he can be persuaded, okay, about trying to neutralize the Supreme Court. I think he can be persuaded, okay, on that. He never does any of this fiscal sustainability, austerity, fiscal responsibility crap. You never hear that from him. I think he's got to know what MMT is about. We can find out about that, though.
And what he would have to do is get Stephanie Kelton to be part of his campaign.
I think he could get Stephanie Kelton easily to be part of his campaign.
Or either Fadl Kaboub.
Yeah, I think both of them would do it in a New York second.
I know if I were, running for U.S. Senate, I would have you, of course, as my economics advisor, because you're MMT, and you would be a damn good one for me. And plus, you and I have discussed this at full length. Imagine me being a U.S. Senator under a Merkley administration.
Oh, yeah. That would be fun. That would be fun.
And
I
what
could
it would,
be your
and what it would,
advisor because I live about 35 miles west of DC. So,
oh, cool. So
already
whenever I'm,
DC,
so whenever I'm in town, I can just crash at your place and call it a day.
of course.
Or just take it and rent a campsite out there and just take a camper up there with me. I wouldn't personally live in DC if I were an elected leader. I would want to be back home when I'm not in the Senate. Like,
I'm
I would
sure you
not own
would
a
be.
property up there.
Yeah, properties up here are really expensive. We actually live in an active senior development that's federally subsidized,
Oh, that's
which is
cool.
the only way we could afford, to live up here. It's an over 55 development, and the reason why we're still here is because we lived here for a long time, and our grandchildren are here.
Yeah, if I were a U.S. senator and all that, I would locate me a campground near D.C. and just pop up my camper there and have my mobile Wi-Fi hotspot on with me
Yeah,
and have my laptop to work on stuff when I'm not at the Senate chamber.
yeah, but you'd be spending long hours, I think, at the Senate because I think that's just the job.
Yeah, and I'd be going back to my camper trailer and just sleeping
Probably.
and use a local laundromat to wash my clothes. Or just come over to yours and Bonnie's place and do that.
Sure. Except you'd have to go down the hall, because we don't have a washing machine in the apartment or a dryer.
Ah, that's fine.
Okay, in this development, though, uh, there are 2 washers and 2 dryers, on every floor here. So it's not really that much of a hardship to walk a few steps to where they are.
But you have to buy a car and use them.
Now, we've got fairly small apartments here, but they're functional. And they're fine for 2 people.
I remember when you used to do your shows a few years back, you had like a whole like wall of books.
I still have the wall of books. It's still here, but I just prefer to stream from the living room these days. It just seems like it's more open, and there's more space.
Oh man, those were the days you with that book wall as your backdrop. That was like classic, like back in the day streams from like 2016 through what 2020, 2021.
I guess I started streaming about 2017.
Yeah.
And I've kept on streaming, since then.
I remember coming across one of your posts like in 2015, 2016, just as like in an RP group whenever I started hearing about MMT, and I was like, this dude's out of his fucking mind if he thinks taxes don't fund federal spending. I commented on your post. I was like, you're out of your damn mind if you think that way.
And well, of course, the person who really showed that beyond the shadow of a doubt was Stephanie Kelton, with her paper, that she wrote back in 1998.
I love Stephanie Kelton. She's cool.
She is. She is.
I would like that. If there's ever going to be another MMT convention or whatever, I'd like to go to it.
Okay, I suspect there might be one this year, but I don't know. I'm not sure, but I
I
sort of
can always go with
I
Russ
sort of heard
Gallman.
there might be some rumblings here in D.C., but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I would like to. I could just ride up there with Russ Gallman.
Yeah, that would be fun.
I
That would be a lot of fun.
like old Russ.
Me too. Russ is a great guy.
And
Okay.
while he's in town, he can also come by and if you have a piano, he can tune it for you.
Unfortunately, we don't have a piano, but you guys can certainly come over for dinner.
Oh yeah, that would be fun.
That's for sure.
Maybe I can have him be a economics advisor.
No reason why not. You probably have enough of a budget as a senator to do that.
Or just have Stephanie Kelton come on board or Fadl Kaboub.
Okay, so April said Kennedy's closing statement was the best of all. But was it just more tell them what they want to hear propaganda? And then she said, yeah, probably. I'm not sure I can answer that question. Okay, because one day some candidate is going to tell people what they want to hear.
Yeah, that's Joe Biden, Trump, those types.
Obama, George Bush,
AOC,
Bill Clinton. They all tell people, okay, what they want to hear. But the thing is, someday somebody's going to mean it. And you can't be so cynical that you think no one is going to mean what they say.
Yeah. Oh God, I could just imagine it now. Me getting sworn in as a senator, and then I'm on the Senate floor, and then it comes time for me to introduce a statement. Oh man, imagine me being the first independent elected to from Georgia, and I come up there and I'm like, and I'm looking at all the rest of them. I'm like, are y'all out of your fucking minds?
Yeah, you'd really introduce something fresh to the Senate, Greg.
I'd probably be the first one on the Senate floor to use the F word. I would probably. You remember Dennis Skinner, who was a member of Parliament of the Bolsover constituency in the UK?
Nope.
If you have never, he was like an older. He's like in his 90s now. He was like a older version of Jeremy Corbyn.
What year?
He lost his election in 2019.
Oh, by the way, question: Did Jeremy Corbyn win in this election?
I don't know when their election is supposed to be, like at the end of this month, I think.
Okay, so it's still coming up.
Hold on. Oh, it's on July the 4th.
Right, July 4th. Right. So we have to wait to see whether Corbyn got back into Parliament.
Oh, he's polling higher than everybody.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
great.
so he's still going to keep his seat no matter what. The people.
Okay, so that's great, but he's also joining with George Galloway, right?
Yeah, George Galloway did not run a candidate in that race, so he told his Workers' Party people there to team up with Corbyn to keep him in.
Yeah.
So did the UK Greens.
Okay, folks, I think we've been at it for 3 hours and 38 minutes.
But Dennis Skinner served as a member of Parliament for Bolsover for 49 years, from 1970 to 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, tomorrow's Iran's elections. Well, actually, it's tomorrow there anyway.
Oh, that's
It's
going to
probably
be
already.
really important too.
Yes.
Okay, so who's going to win that?
The person that's been leading, I can't think of his name, begins with a P. He's still been in the lead. Two other people dropped out. So he's the one that everybody's
You talking about the interim?
No, they're having an election. Their election is tomorrow. Let me see his name.
You're right, to select the successor to Raisi.
Yeah. It's that I always forget his name. Well, I'm not good with with those names anyway.
Me neither. I like whenever I'm about to butcher one of their names, I just say, I'm not going to pronounce that. I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole.
Yep. Okay, let me see. Press TV. I'm going to open it up. Yep, they're voting. It's already ahead of schedule, hours ahead of time. So it's like we're ready for bed, and they're up and getting their day going.
One thing I would advocate for if I were in the U.S. Senate is move our election day from a Tuesday to a Friday and make it where it is a national paid holiday.
Yeah, and
where
it's a
you
long
get time
weekend.
off.
Yeah.
Make it where you have 3 days. Make election day and move it from Tuesday to Friday, which makes a lot more sense, and it gives people a 3-day weekend.
Now, well, you could have election day on Monday and
Yeah.
make it a 3-day weekend also. Okay, that way. Okay, and then people would have the weekend to think about it.
Yeah, and make it a national holiday where people get the time off of work where they could, and that would increase voter turnout as well.
It would.
And that's what the Green Party needs to be advocating for, is moving the date of the election to a Monday.
I
It
saw
seems to
something.
me the Green Party can easily be convinced of that. Okay, if they're not, if that's not already part of the platform, it's so easy to do that.
Mm-hmm. The leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, cast his ballot at a polling station in Tehran just as the voting began on Friday.
Okay, Ali Khamenei.
Yeah. Let me see.
Okay, we're starting to lose people now. We peaked out at about 146 people, 147 people.
Oh, good.
And we're now down to 146. So we just lost one.
Okay.
Probably was Evelina. Oh, we're back up to 147.
Okay. But they're voting in Iran, and we're all going to be going to bed soon, and they're up starting their day, voting, and
yeah.
Okay,
I think it's time for us to say goodnight.
I think so too.
And don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and buy Joe a coffee because he likes to smack us around if he don't get a cup of coffee in the morning.
Okay, by the way, we only have 3 likes and we have 147 people who are part of this. So it would be a big help if you dropped us a lot more likes before you leave. So thank you, everybody. I'm sure there are more likes than only 3.
Yes.
I've noticed in the past that no, we just got another like. It just went up to 4. Okay.
I'm still gonna butcher his name. He's the person, Masoud Pezizakian. Pezeshkian. He's been leading. He's the Reform Party.
Okay, before I know how to pronounce that, I got to see the spelling. Okay, then I can make an attempt. I'm usually pretty good at the Iranian names, I noticed.
Yeah, because it's if you just say I ran an election, that's what they're all talking about it now. Different channels. Pezeshkian.
Okay, I take it people think that Trump won that debate, right?
Yep.
So that's probably the prevailing opinion.
Yes, because of just well, you really don't even have to say it. I mean, he just looked like he wasn't there, Biden. Even it wasn't just his answers; it was the mumbling and everything else.
I know he really looked like he was feeble.
Right. That's just so sad.
It is sad. And Trump still looked like he was fairly vigorous. Of course, he was the same old Trump, lying through his teeth all the time,
Exactly.
and nothing but fantasies, coming out of his mouth, with sort of a grain of truth in them. He's good at sort of having a grain of truth, in the middle of the fantasies. But boy, I mean, his narratives are just outrageous.
So this man Pezeshkian, it says the lone reformist candidate, is also the oldest at 69. He has called for a greater outreach to outside world as a means of improving Iran's economy. So he's improving the economy.
Right. So he's going to be really big on BRICS.
Yes.
Which is really a good idea for them.
Mm-hmm.
So that should improve their situation considerably. Yeah, BRICS is going to explode this year.
And next year.
Yeah, but especially this year because the Russians are fixing to explode it in October. I wouldn't be surprised if they add 40 new countries.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be terrific. Okay, folks, I think it's time to say goodnight. It's 1:45.
Night. I'm out.
Okay, take care, Greg. Okay,
Yes,
we'll
good night.
tomorrow, right?
Yes, we should be back tomorrow night.
Okay, I'll be back at 8 o'clock, certainly.
And I'll be at 9.
Okay, you'll be at 9 and you'll probably be covering the Iranian election, right?
Yes, they'll have all the results in by then. They're already out voting, and we haven't gone to sleep yet.
Okay. So I'll be joining you at 9 tomorrow.
Yes.
And at 8 tomorrow, what I'm going to cover is it's funny, I'm going to recover, I'm going to cover the austerity stuff.
Okay.
It's time to do something on that again. There's a new report from the Peter G. Peterson Foundation saying that CBO's new report shows a worsening fiscal outlook, which of course is bullshit. It doesn't show a worsening fiscal outlook at all. And then I'm going to do a piece, from Ellen Brown about the government borrowing rather than printing. She doesn't seem to know the government doesn't print much these days. And then I'm going over an old piece of my own on permanent cures for debt ceiling crises.
Okay.
So it's going to be heavy MMP tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good. It's a time for it. People have to know, especially the election season.
Yeah, people have to know because Bobby, he doesn't say, okay, it's austerity, but his emphasis on the importance of, how high the debt is, uh, uh, makes people think that he's going to be cutting programs.
Right.
Now, he did say tonight that we're not going to get there by cutting, that we have to grow our way out of it.
Right.
So that was a good sign
Mm-hmm.
that he's not going to be about cutting everything except, 50%, okay, the military.
Right.
But of course, he also has to know that he's not going to be growing very fast or very much if he doesn't do a lot of deficit spending
Mm-hmm.
to start with.
Mm.
That's how you get to grow. You deficit spend on the right things.
Free schooling. Get 'em in.
Free schooling, yeah, for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, I got to say good night. Good night, Bonnie. Good night, Joe.
Okay, good night, Dee, and thank you for coming
Oh,
and
you're welcome.
participating. It was fun. Good night. Okay, good night, all. I'm going to leave also. Thank you all for coming. So glad to see 147 people there. That's really great.